Wow. We're here. We're just about here. Sorry about this. Join me in a second, of course, to talk about new distilleries that maybe are not that new anymore. And I'll also give you all the excuses and reasons that I'm over 15 minutes late. I do apologize. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sorry for being late, and I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very late starting vPub on this Thursday night. Thank you all so much for your patience. I don't think this has ever happened before. Sure, we've had postponed vPubs and things like that, but I've always given you notice. I could make up all sorts of fantastic excuses. I've picked a creaky stool as well. Apologies. I'm a bit out of sorts. I could make up lots and lots of excuses for being late tonight, but the truth is, I went out at 5:30 to, and I thought everything was organised and I was ready to go. I went out at 5:30 to caddy for my wife, who was playing in a golf championship semi-final tonight, and I thought that I'd have plenty time to go out and take care of business there and get back in time. And I literally ran in the door maybe 1 or 2 minutes before going live. So what I did is I started the stream just to let everybody know that I was coming, put up the ticker thing there, put a pinned message in to say that I was late, and then ran around getting golf shoes off and all of the nonsense to try and catch up. It took me 15 minutes to do it, and I do apologize. It's terrible of me. I appreciate everyone that turns up to support, to play along live, to join in the chat and to listen and things, and it's not very good when I'm late. That said, for those of you that are still here, for those of you that haven't disappeared, wondering what I've got onto, I've been getting up to. Thank you for your patience. I really do appreciate it. My specs aren't even clean. I'm not even wearing the right specs. I didn't get time to do makeup, fix the lights, do anything. It's fine as long as you can hear me and see me. I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Jimmy Legg's already bought me a dram. Maybe if I slip Roy a fiver, he'll join us. Thank you, Jimmy. That's not what I was waiting on, but it's very much appreciated. I better get something into the glass to welcome you all. I've got this randomly here. I've got an English whiskey in front of me here. It's the Wireworks Heritage Chevallier at 57.3% ABV, high ABV to get things started. But it happens to be a hand, and I didn't grab anything in particular. Luckily, I've got the bottles. I think I've got most of the bottles ready. I had them ready earlier before I went out tonight. But I didn't pour myself a whiskey to welcome you all. This will be more than ideal for that purpose. How's your Thursday? I hope it's a bit less hectic than my own. Welcome, everyone. Cheers. If you're picking this up on the replay, of course, hopefully you've noticed that I've put in some housekeeping markers underneath so that you can skip ahead. I'm going to try and do is see if I can brighten these lights a little bit. Maybe it's me, maybe it's just the way it is, but if I could brighten that up a bit, might see things, see me a wee bit better. I don't know if that's better or worse or whatever. Regardless, of course, the topic tonight is about distilleries, new distilleries. Since the turn of the century, or maybe if you go back to Arran in 1995, which was probably the first of what we consider the new wave of distilleries. It was followed up by Daftmill and Kilchoman and Glengyle in the early 2000s, and then came Roseisle and Ailsa Bay and various other distilleries throughout the 2000s. But it wasn't until the 2010s, the 20-teens, let's say, late in the 20-teens, that we really started to see an explosion of interest in independent distilling and independent whiskey distilleries. Is my focus working okay? I hope that it is. And it really, really picked up some pace. And that pace didn't really slow down, and maybe until the last 2 or 3 years, I would say. But what that means is that now we have the glut of distilleries. It's not a very good word, a glut, but we have a number of distilleries that I believe now have the capability to put out 7, 8-year-old whiskey or older, which should now put them in a category that they are no longer kind of in their infancy anymore. I mean, relatively speaking, of course, that they are compared to legacy distilleries. But I think the way that we are making whiskey today in 2026, by the time that malt is 7 or 8 years old, we've got a really good handle on the spirit they're putting out, the direction, the thinking, the strategy, the policy, the positioning of the product, the cost of it, who it's targeted at, all of these wonderful things. And as whiskey geeks and whiskey enthusiasts and the people who spend more money on whiskey than anyone else, whiskey, in order to drink and consume and enjoy it, of course, I don't mean to collect or hoard or to invest in or anything like that. I'm speaking about the people that actually sit down in company and geek out about the stuff, that chase the flavor, that chase the next new and exciting thing. As geeks, we are then able to get a good understanding of what that whiskey is about. So it's inevitable that we'll reach some point in time where we'll draw a judgment on that whiskey, on that company, on that producer, on that distillery, on that brand. And we're going to form our opinions. And you know what? It's the modern era, and idiots like me can just hop up on their bar stool of a Thursday night, sometimes 15 minutes late, and shout their opinions and share it with everyone who's willing to give it a listen. What use is that? What position do I have to do such a thing? How can I sit here and talk about, well, this distillery is X years old now, they should be doing this and they're only achieving this? I have no more right than anyone else to do that, but I have no less right than anyone else to do that. I will caveat all of what I'm going to share with you tonight with the obvious thing that happens every week. This is not expert opinion. This is my opinion as a consumer and somebody who buys a lot of whiskey. If you need to understand just how much whiskey I buy, have a wee look at the collection video from a couple of weeks ago and you'll understand how much time and money I invest in exploring whiskey, contemporary whiskies and legendary whiskies and any kind of whiskies. My focus is, of course, on Scotch, but we will end up kind of pushing the envelope outside of Scotch a little bit tonight. That gives me a perspective as a consumer that is probably of value to somebody. Maybe not a huge amount of value. It's maybe not going to change anything significantly, but we're just here to enjoy this thing, and we're here to get some consensus, and we're here to understand where the best places to put our money might be. So that means that while it's only just my personal opinion, it is worth something. It's not just from thin air, it is from genuine experience. But I'll also go further than that. The company that I keep around whiskey, my friends, my whiskey friends, my pals, my peers, my fellow whiskey club members, my fellow festival attendees, my community, they have opinions about whiskey as well. And it would surprise you how much of a consensus we build. And the opinions that I'm going to share with you tonight are my own opinions, but they are backed up, not fully in every angle and every opinion, but they are quite generally backed up by the feelings of the community. If you disagree with what I'm saying tonight, and if you feel that I've been a bit harsh, or if you feel that I'm being a bit too kind in any direction, that's what the comment section are for underneath. However, I do take on board that what I say about whiskey can have some effect. It can have some effect on some people's feelings. It could potentially have some effect on sales, incremental, tiny amount, I would imagine. But I think what we need to do is not just say these things and move on, say these things and why we feel these things, or why we've uncovered or discovered these things. It's just like any other spot, any other place. It's like Reddit or Facebook or or any of the internet spots out there. It's like any of the whiskey clubs or any place that you consume and enjoy and share and discuss whiskey. This space is a safe space for everyone to share their opinions, including yours. Tonight, of course, what I'm broadcasting to you from my very privileged position, thank you, is my opinions. Let's see how much they agree with you. Anyway, before we get into all of that tonight, I need to just catch my breath and raise a wee glass and welcome all of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. And once more, appreciate your patience with me. I realise I ask for your patience a lot, but I love that you're here. It means a lot to me. And I'm glad that you hung out with me and waited while I got my stuff together this evening. I'll scroll back a wee bit. If you're trying to get my attention, write Aquavite or at Aquavite in the YouTube chat, not on Facebook. This is the YouTube chat. And I'll try and interact with you as much as I can tonight. I'm still looking very flushed. I don't know. I think that's mostly the lighting. Of course, you've seen there's a kind of upgrade to the backdrop. I've made a lot more space behind me here to accommodate more bottles, of course. And with Roddy being here last week, you might have got a wee glimpse of that. I'm still messing around with things, so the lighting's going to be a wee bit off, but I don't think it's looking too bad. As long as you can hear me, surely you don't really need to see me. I've also been wearing a golf cap, and I'm in a wee bit of a mess tonight, but it's okay. Yellow card in order, or yellow submarine, says Des. I accept the yellow card, Des. I deserve a yellow card tonight. I really do. Jimmy Legg is saying you don't need golf shoes to caddy. Oh, you do. Have you ever, especially when it's a hilly course like the one that we play on, Jimmy? I was out with spikes tonight. The weather was dreadful. The course was very wet. Whiskey with Molly, makeup. Makeup. Very tongue-in-cheek. I've never worn makeup. I never intend to wear makeup. Can you imagine? Tim Pills is saying, evening, Roy, and Aquavite and all you barflies. Hope you're well. Good to see you, Tim. Good to see you, Ben. John Ginger Genius is in saying, good evening, Roy, and all the barflies. Good evening, buddy. Big Jimmy Jazz is here from Jimmy. I wonder how things are going down in Boston. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm going to have some time off from the football. I've been feasting on it. The World Cup is a wonderful, wonderful event, regardless of where on the planet that it's held. But right now it's in the United States and Canada and Mexico, and Scotland have won their first game. I'm very much enjoying all the vibes that go along with it. I wonder how things are going down in Boston for you, buddy. Or you're not exactly in Boston, but you're close by, right? David is saying makeup. Absolutely not, David. Don't worry. Paul Mackay, golf coach, and Paul, good to see you, buddy. Good evening. Did your wife win? Yes, Paul. She won on the 17th. Two up, one to play. So the job was done. But it was slow tonight because it's all championship rounds. It's the semi-finals for the men's and the seniors and the juniors and everyone. And obviously it's much more serious golf, so things are a bit more meticulous and slow and by the rules and all that kind of thing. Ironically, I have the US Open on the TV in the background, says Ben. Fantastic, buddy. I've not caught any of it. I've only had time to have a side eye on some football shenanigans. Jimmy Legacy and Agraviti. How did Lynn do in the tourney? She's through to the final on Saturday. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Jimmy, for asking after her. Scott Thor is saying, how did the wife get on in the tournament? Sorry, Scott, I've answered. No, darken the lights. Darken. Says Jimmy, you want some darker? Let's see. Just how dark do you want them, Jimmy? I know that you're kidding on, but we'll see just how bad it can. The camera will probably try to make up for it. There we go. We can make things very, very dark. But we don't need that. We need it. We need it a wee bit brighter, right? At the very least, I need to use them to see. Gary Field is saying, shattered after a late night with barflies in London last night. I'll catch up on replay. Good night, all. Good stuff, Gary. Now that you're back here catching us in the replay, it means that you've been able to skip past that long delay for me being late tonight. Rick Johnson, San Francisco. Rick, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. Cheers and good afternoon from San Francisco, Roy, and fellow barflies. No Tartan Army here, but still lots of festivities. Yes, absolutely. And we don't know how the competition's going to shape up. I would love a miracle to happen in Scotland to get through, and you never know what could happen then, Rick. Grain and Malt is saying, evening, Aquavite, midsummer here this weekend. Looking forward to a 4-day weekend and a couple of days away to treat myself for my birthday next week. Just have to decide which bottle to take. Good problems to have, buddy. And here, let's raise a wee glass in advance and wish our pal James in Sweden a grain of malt the superstar and the wonderful human that he is, a fantastic birthday. Many happy returns when it comes, buddy. Cheers to you. Finally done is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 30 months, and he's saying enjoying the Deanston Chronicles tonight. Nice dram, fantastic, buddy. I've not tried the most recent release from Deanston. Frank TG is saying, Aquavita, you're worth twice the wait. I've got the Ardnamurchan Madeira cask in my glass. Odd, I swear it tastes just like the Glenkinchie 13. Oh, I wonder which Glenkinchie 13 you're speaking about. Is that the special releases, Glenkinchie? Was that also Madeira? I think you might have some maybe Madeira overlap there. I'm trying to scratch my head and think about the Glenkinchie release. I don't think I have it. Anyway, buddy, it's wonderful to have you in, Frank, and thank you very much for your generous dram. Cheers to you, buddy. Belated good evening. Barman says, Petehead, good to have you in. And Jerry Miller is saying, good evening, Roy. Good to have you, Jerry, as well. Gino is also saying, good evening. Good to have you from Canada, Gino. Yeah, lots of people from all over the place being super patient with me. Dan is saying, Aquaviti, do you have any idea what's up with Crafty and Galloway? They changed names, but there's nothing to find out about them except the Sassenach blend, which existed before Galloway Distillery. The Sassenach blend was sourced whiskey, of course, but Crafty themselves and the actual distillery down in Lowlands there, tiny micro distillery, I have had no contact with, from, or around them. I guess the future, we'll wait and see if they've got anything to share with us in the future. So sorry, I can't help you out with any intel there. Herman Blocker is saying, good evening, everybody in Aquaviti. Just a word that my friend will be able to join us in November at Glasgow Whisky Festival in Campbelltown. Fantastic stuff, Herman. Looking forward to welcoming you and your pals once more. Sean Cosser is saying, sipping a no longer new Torravik Sound of Sleet batch strength. So on theme tonight, a cracker of a dram. The Sound of Sleet, I didn't try. I've got a few Torravigs over there. I've got them well covered. I've got the Knocknamoynia. I've got the Altglen. I've got the Thai. I've got plenty, and I've got the cast strength as well. So the Sound of Sleet is one that missed. How's it going down, Sean? Are you enjoying it, buddy? And just as the chat jumps to the bottom, I think that's a good time for us to kick on. I've been holding you up tonight. Graham Walt saying, too kind, superstar, much appreciated. It's a pleasure, buddy. I hope you have a fantastic time. Whiskey Weekend Dram. Harris saying, Arran in the glass, the barley, fantastic. And Petehead is saying, joined you with the heritage barley to stay on theme, Slancheva. That's the Ardnamurchan Petehead, fantastic. And Frank is saying, that was a Glenkinchie joke about you and Roddy. Okay. Yes, there's been much chatter about last week. You'll see over my left shoulder here the mystery malts that Roddy and I opened. And we had just great fun, despite being utterly humbled by whiskey once more. Some of the lines and some of the silliness that we come out with will go down as channel lore, no doubt. But the most important thing is that we did that. And the people that have actually also done it, they've come back to me and said, we got similar results, or we were all over the place as well. We didn't score very well. I don't think anyone has been able to confuse Lefroy's and Glenkinchie's and some of the shenanigans that we got up to last week. If you haven't seen last week's live stream, please go back and watch it for no other reason than to just see us in our pure, unadulterated shock. Regardless of how poorly we did, I had the best fun last week. I had the best time with Roddy, and I care not a jot how I'm judged by the wider whiskey onlookers in terms of how well I did sipping the whiskey, in terms of how well I did guessing what kind of whiskey it was. I have seen nobody stepping up and stepping forward to say, I'd have got 6 out of 6 there. We don't seem to have that arrogance, that confidence, or that kind of ego in the community. Even the people that are capable of doing that, they tend to be quite quiet because they're aware that whiskey at any time can really give you a bit of a surprise. Anyway, it's time to get on with the topic tonight. I mean, we're only 32 minutes in. In the end, it's not much later than a normal vPub, let's be honest. But once again, apologies for keeping you all waiting this evening. I'm very grateful to be here with you tonight. We have a wonderful, wonderful array and variety and choice and selection in whiskey right now. And I'm not just speaking about the amount of distilleries that are releasing product today. I'm speaking about the amount of new distilleries that have coming along, releasing product purely for single malt sake. There's a big difference between the legacy distilleries and a lot of the new independent, modern, smaller distilleries, because the smaller distilleries, not exclusively so, tend to be focused much more on single malt for single malt's sake. So they're bringing out their own brand, and they're prioritizing their own brand, and they're prioritizing their production around building a brand for their product. And, you know, they're focusing domestically, neighboring countries, easy export first, and then they'll hopefully build and try and export it into further markets, all of that kind of thing. A lot of distilleries are really quite small, really tiny, and won't really have the ability to go into export markets and things like that. But you'll still have the ability through your community, through your travels, through your explorations and visits, whatever it may be, you'll still have the opportunity to happen across these distilleries. But right now we find ourselves in 2026, and we find ourselves in a scenario where we already consider Glengyle, Kilchoman, Daftmill, I would also suggest, and certainly Arran as established distilleries. We're very aware that they've come along in modern times, or they've reappeared in modern times. In the case of Glengyle, Kilchoman, you know, originally closed in 1926, brought back to life in 2004. But these are kind of, they've almost become such a part of the familiar whiskey landscape, part of the lexicon of whiskey, that we don't really consider them new distilleries anymore. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you guys consider Arran still to be a new distillery. But when they've got the ability to release an official 30-year-old, I think we're kind of beyond that, right? Similar for Daftmill, Glengyle, Kilchoman, even, all beyond 20 years now, beyond 2 decades. But let's also consider all the new distilleries that have still to release, or they've only released a 3-year-old. So we can't really judge them yet. We can't judge them on new make. We can't judge them on what's not been put out there. And we can't really judge them fully on a 3-year-old or an inaugural or a pre-release or a work in progress or whatever it may be. But in between those, there are a roughly counting, depending on how you want to define this in-between banding, there's somewhere in the order of 26 distilleries that have the ability to put out, in 2026, an 8-year-old malt whiskey. Maybe they haven't really reached their 8-year birthday yet, as I speak to you in June, but at some point in 2026, they're going to have the ability to say, this whiskey, this malt that we have maturing here is now 8 years old. Now, that 7 or 8-year-old whiskey, I think, is now beyond that kind of nascent, new makey, a bit rough, a bit work in progress stage. I think once we reach that point, we're starting to get a feel for what this mature spirit is going to be like. Not only that, through the releases that they've chosen to give us or not give us, depending on the policies and the strategies and the thinking behind each individual distillery, brand, producer, that type of thing, we've got a good idea now what the vibe is, where their market is going to be potentially pointed at. Are they looking after the whiskey drinkers, the whiskey geeks? Do they want to get good quality liquid on lips that word of mouth will carry and people will start to chatter about it, much in the way that potentially Ardnamurchan and Ardnahoe have done as examples? Are they somebody that's going to point towards a very exclusive, a very limited, maybe potentially a kind of luxury, highly priced? You understand that it's difficult to describe, and it's not the space that I can play in, so it's difficult for me to comment on that area. It's just not a place that I play in. So we could use Arbicki, I think, is an example of that, the inaugural release from Falkirk, and maybe some others that have just been priced a bit weirdly. Or are there some distilleries out there that's just gone straight to stack them high and sell them cheap type methodology, where, you know, the ABVs are a bit low, the distribution routes that they use and the route to market that they use is not through a specialist malt whiskey retailer or spirits retailer, for example, but it's maybe through you know, high volume distribution, multiples, supermarkets, that type of thing. Despite some of these new distilleries and new brands being completely unheard of before. That's a route that some of them have taken. Regardless, I'm going to brutally break them down into 3 categories tonight. I'm going to break them down into successes, what I believe is my personal opinion, with a little bit of added kind of consensus and vibes from you guys, who those successes have been. Then we'll look at who the possibilities are for the future. Possibilities, I mean, somebody that's kind of like, oh, we've had some good signals or signs from, but not enough for us to jump in. These are the ones that are respected and we are willing to give them a chance easily, but they have not yet set the heather alight. You understand what I mean by they have potential, but they've not shown their full cards or full colours yet. And then we'll go on to, and I struggled with a name for this because you wouldn't call them failures. You wouldn't call them poor, bad, rubbish. You wouldn't be, I don't want to be negative when it's just something I don't understand, right? So the last category I've called the unintelligibles, simply because I can't get my head round the whiskey, the strategy, the messaging, the production, the shape of what they're trying to do. Now, that might be down to me because that template that I'm applying to try and understand their business, the way I go about their business, is a very specific whiskey geek template. It's a very specific whiskey chaser, whiskey botherer type mindset. And that might not be fair for me. But I suspect that most of the people that are hanging out with me right now this evening are of a similar mindset. I'm going to start off by asking everyone, imagine that we're kind of distillery owners. Imagine we're sitting there with, we've built our distillery, it's making whiskey, the whiskey's come along, it's hit that point of being legal whiskey, it's hit the point of being mature enough to start to sell. What do we start to do with that whiskey? What would we do, the people that are hanging out with me tonight? Because it's my belief that the recipe is, am I naive to think that the recipe is really that simple? Because to me, it's simple. Try and be as transparent as you can be. If you don't want to display an age statement, that's fine, but talk about the whiskey that's gone into that bottle. Be proud of the whiskey that's gone into that bottle. What has been used to make that vatting? Express why you think it should be portrayed in such a way. Don't lean into fluff and generic marketing bluff. Find a plain English way to state what your whiskey is all about with confidence. It just seems obvious to me. Then do not filter it. Do not chill filter it. But when I say filter it, of course, a mechanical filter, taking out jar and all that stuff. All whiskey gets filtered, okay? But chill filtration is an aggressive thing where you remove fats and oils by chilling the whiskey down to freezing or close to freezing. And then you take out all that. When you take out all those fats and oils that have came out of solution, and you force it through that very, very fine mesh filter under pressure, and all that oil is left behind, all those fats are left behind. Not only do you remove flavor, but you also take a wee bit of color out of the whiskey. And the biggest thing that can be demonstrated, the most straightforward thing to be demonstrated, is mouthfeel is removed. And also when you're chill filtering, you're only chill filtering because you want to put the whiskey out there at low ABV. All whiskey can be sold legally as whiskey at 40% ABV, but whiskey made from barley, 100% malted barley, such as malt whiskey, you drop that below 46, 47% ABV, and as soon as you introduce cold temperatures or whatever to it, you start to struggle with that whiskey. It's going to cloud potentially in the bottle, in the glass, on the shelf, during transportation, all of these things. In order to help preserve against that, you need to keep the ABV higher. And you need to put explanation on the label to tell people if the whiskey is cloudy, it's a natural phenomenon. And to relax with it, it's because it's high integrity, and that's why they're seeing the clouding. Leave it to settle in a warm room. Your whiskey is fine. Don't get me started on adding colour to whiskey. Why do you need to add colour to whiskey? Because dark whiskey sells. Don't give me any of the nonsense stories over the years about, oh, it's all about consistency and everybody needs to see. People are not stupid. It's 2026. People are not thick. They understand that something, if something is natural, it might not be the same color every time. Now, I know if you're selling millions of cases of grouse or Grant's blends or Ballantyne's or whatever blend it may be, that's something that you may have to manage a little bit. With the inconsistency of what comes out of a natural cask, it's going to be different colors all the time, and you might want to adjust with caramel coloring and mass market blends and things. But don't market malt whiskey as the purest, most natural, wonderful thing, 100% single malt Scotch whiskey, and then strip it and add color to it. I think we need to keep integrity there. I think we need to look after what malt is. I think malt fights with us. It doesn't like to be messed around with. And we always have to kind of contrive things and engineer things when we try to put, profitability is not a bad word, but when it's put forward before all else, malt whiskey doesn't want to play comfortably in that category. So that, to me, is maybe me just being a little bit kind of closed, a kind of geek perspective, obviously, there, not really thinking about, the wider whiskey, mechanics of business and all of that type of thing. That's right. And if you do want to concern yourself with all of that, then probably the vPub isn't the place for you to be hanging out with, because I'm going to really be talking a lot on the vPub about transparency. I'm going to really want to talk about celebrating things that are natural, a product that is made as earnestly as possible, and something that we can enjoy, especially when we're spending the money that we're spending on it. Let's be honest. Is it too much to ask for a wee bit of integrity? So I believe that on the face of it, the recipe, it doesn't seem to be that difficult. Natural whiskey, earnestly presented, and finally sold at a fair price. Don't bullshit us with the idea that this whiskey is so rare that it's worth triple figures, four figures, and nonsense like that when you're bottling a 3-year-old malt. It's happening a wee bit too much, and I think that I just can't fathom where and who is buying, where these are being sold, and who are buying these whiskies that are sold in such a way. But I think we'll touch upon some of them tonight. Eric Cunliffe, my pal in Canada, who was able to join us at the locker on Sunday night. It's amazing to see him in on a Thursday night. He's saying, just jumping on between classes, wishing the legend Peter Lee a happy birthday. Thanks, Roy, for introducing me to some of the best people I know. Love you all. I love you too, Eric. And especially love you for reminding me that it's Peter Lee's birthday. When is that? Is that today? I usually get a wee notification or something up from Facebook or whatever. Is it this evening? If it's Peter Lee's birthday, it must be very, very close to his birthday. If it's not today, it's soon. Let's raise a wee glass for the superstar Peter and wish him a very happy birthday, many happy returns. And we're glad to have the boy around. Cheers to the superstar Peter Lee. Happy birthday, son. Cheers. And Eric, thanks to you for your generous dram and for making it in between your classes tonight. Earnestly, that's a good way to put it, Aquavite, says Jimmy Legg. Well, honesty, integrity, earnestly, that's it. The best foot forward, right? A grain of malt, James is saying, Aquavite, it was yesterday. Slightly belated, Peter. Fantastic. We've got his wee emoji in. You've managed to find it. Peter Lee walking along with it. He's a fisherman. So his emoji, that's a fish he's carrying in his hand. I don't think it's a whiskey bottle, if I remember well. But it could be a whiskey bottle. If it's a whiskey bottle, it's Springbank. Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so I think it was a fairly straightforward thing. So let's get brutal now. Let's go into, or let's start off by being kind. Why don't we do it that way? Why don't we start off by sharing what new distilleries I would consider being successes? And for that, I'm going to have to do a wee screen share, I think. Let's hope I can do this okay. Windy, I'll do that. I'll share that. Good stuff. That should work, right? And if I click on my other screen, I should be able to control it okay. So just to caveat, that's what the wee asterisk is down at the bottom left there, saying capable of releasing more or less an 8-year-old whiskey in 2026. That's where the cutoff is for this. So we're looking at a spread of distilleries that have appeared since Kilchoman, Glengyle and Daftmill, 2004, 2005, 2006, that era. Between then and about 2017, let's say. 2018 until today, we've kind of got somewhere in the order of 8 years. But if we're up until about late 2017, early 2018, we should be able to cover about 26 distilleries. Now, I'm not going to go through each and individual distillery blow by blow and hold up a bottle or whatever. I've got bottles for each of these slides I'm going to hold up, and I'll kind of sip one and we'll have a wee chitty chat and focus on an individual distillery. And hopefully through that, what I might actually be able to do is talk about a distillery that we potentially haven't spoken too much about on the vPub before, alongside distilleries that you've heard plenty about over the years. So let's bring in the successes. This number's 8 distilleries. I've managed to count 8, which I would put in the unequivocal category of being community successes so far. Let's start off with an obvious one. Ardnahoe first came out a couple of years ago with their inaugural 5-year-old release. They've just released a 7-year-old for Fashiel this year. Later in this year, later in 2026, their whiskey will start to turn 8 years old. There isn't a hell of a lot of that around. So it's going to be next year before we see an 8-year-old out from them. But already, I think I would suggest to you that with very few exceptions, Ardnahoe brought us probably the best inaugural. They were very confident bringing out a 5-year-old. And I think the releases that they've brought out since have proven them already to be an established, beautiful distillery that is a fantastic positive addition to Islay and to Scotch whisky in general. Certainly heavily peated. They call themselves a classic Islay style. To me, the peat is very prominent and forefront. They express a little bit like me to Southern Islay called Dalton Coast Distillery. And I think that I mean that fully in a very, very complimentary way. Then next up is an obvious one as well. We've got Ardnamurchan in the lineup here. Ardnamurchan have been amongst the top 3 distilleries across our community. And I don't mean top 3 new distilleries. They are mixing it with Bunnahabhain, Bruichladdich, Arran, and certainly Springbank up there in the top 5. Have a look at the Dramface top 40 as well. Ardnamurchan is always punching way above its weight. I think currently Ardnamurchan sits at position number 2. So to talk about a distillery that appeared in 2014, for me to be sitting here 10, 11, 12 years later, talking about just how much they've made an impact on the whiskey scene, I've admitted to you how many bottles of Ardnamurchan I've collected, right? How many I've managed to collect, and there's not a single one up there that I don't enjoy. That's a remarkable thing for a distillery to achieve. Then we've got the tiny, tiny Dornoch, a fire station up there in Dornoch, just not too far from Dornoch Castle. Obviously a passion product from the Thompson brothers. I know so many of you have not going to have been able to try this product. There's so little of it. It's sold in 50cl bottles. It's expensive, close to £100 a bottle to buy. No matter, it all sells out because it is genuinely scarce. It is in huge demand. And it's because it's a very, very unique spirit. Very dense, very fully flavoured. Has that real kind of handmade vibe about it. A very fermentation room forward, so lots of bready notes and deep, deep, rich, ripe fruits. Just fantastic liquid if you can ever get a chance to get a hold of it. And undoubtedly a success, and that will see the birth of Struy, the Struy project, which is their next distillery project. Then, of course, Glasgow. After initial stumbling from Glasgow, high prices, 50cl bottles, they've managed to just build themselves up and up and up and up, and to the point that probably, if Jimmy's mentioned that word earnestly, it'd be difficult for me to find in modern Glasgow whiskey something that's more earnest than the stuff that they put out there. Of course, everything else that I'm listing here is very earnest, I would say, high integrity. but we see a real outreach from them. They feel very much connected. They are very transparent. They are very open about what they do, and they are very, very playful with what they do as well. One of the biggest things they were able to pull off was the reduction of prices recently for their core range, coming down in price, way ahead of the curve. But also when they switched from 50 cl to 70 cl bottles, they kept the prices the same. So the second time that the prices have come down then recently. Then we move on to Isle of Rassay. Made a huge mistake in the Oswas in the inaugural year that they never got a nomination in the first year. And you guys came in shouting loudly for Rassay, and they won the People's Choice that year. So many people have connected with Rassay. I still have some reservations over certain policies from Rassay, over pricing usually. But there is no doubt that, you might remember we did a vPub on location a few years back on Rassay, the island. There is no doubt that there are earnest vibes, high integrity, high quality, unique whiskey coming from that island that I predict is going to continue to get better and better and better. Kingsbarns and Fife, often a wee bit overlooked by me, if I'm honest, but I do have a few bottles of Kingsbarns here. I've got an 8-year-old, I've got a 10-year-old, I've got a Cask Strength, I've got a Duca, I've got the original Dream to Dram. I've got a wee collection of Kingsbarns there, and I do enjoy it. I have the suspicion, or my own personal belief, that I think Kingsbarns are holding their light under a bushel a little bit. I think they're going to be developing their flavour and their product going forward. And I don't think it's going to get into its stride until it's now hitting those double-digit age statements. I think the Dream to Dram was lovely and creamy. Nostalgia told me that I preferred it over Duca. Then I tried them side by side, and the one I kept picking as my preference on that particular event that night ended up being the Duca, the newer version. So, you know, we can't let nostalgia and rose-tinted spectacles looking backwards, picking out our preferences in whiskey. We've got to sometimes practically try and demonstrate it. But Kingsbarns are coming along very, very nicely. Then we've got Lochleigh in the Lowlands as well. An amazing story, you know, once a cattle farm, then an agricultural farm, growing crops and things like that, growing their own barley, start distilling, all of that stuff. And I think that they're going to build up to be better and better and better. And if you just imagine them putting in some malting floors and a bottling plant and things like that, growing their own barley on site, you've probably got something that's going to be potentially the closest to a pure, unadulterated, single estate whiskey distillery, which is very, very difficult to do in the modern era. Loving our Lochleigh. They released a 7-year-old at the start of this year. It sold out. I didn't get near it. I did get to try it. I would agree that it's the best Lochleigh I've tried. Now that they're coming into their stride, and I think with a wee bit of age, they're going to really show their potency going forward. And finally, we go over to Skye for Torrevik. This means that a lot of you are going to be looking at this list and going, Roy, where is this one? Where is that one? Where's the other one? Hopefully they're going to appear tonight, but unfortunately now they're either going to appear in the possibilities section or in the unintelligibles section, by my little own opinion. But talk about Torrevik on Skye. I think people in our community are talking about Torrevik more than they're talking about Talisker now. One of the most favoured legendary legacy distilleries in existence, one of the top sellers these days in modern times, is Talisker. But with that top selling pressure, we've seen a shift away from affordability, purity, quality, that earnest sentiment, that any whiff of integrity that they had has been diluted and diluted and diluted. And I know that today people still rave about 10-year-old Talisker, but I suspect if that's happening, you're having a better bottle than my 10-year-old Talisker, because I've got one over there right now that just tastes of syrup and fudge and oak. All that lovely kind of dry aspect that Talisker had, that salt and pepper effect, that light peat, that I say light peat, that Talisker is probably pretty heavily peated, right, for most people, but to me it was a bit lighter. Torrevik has taken the place of that. We've got a full-on, kind of parades a lot more almost Islay style, especially with its young products that it's got out there today. Very heavily peated, very pure, very dry, especially when you sip it from a bourbon cask. Love the stuff. More often than not, at the price points that we're able to pick up Torrevik versus the price points of Talisker we can get, I would be picking up Torrevik over Talisker, and I think that says a lot. So there we go. That's kind of, once more I'll caveat it, it is my opinion with a little bit of consensus and picking up what you guys feedback to me a little bit as well. Dan is saying Aberargie for the win. I'll get to Aberargie. They absolutely fall within the categorization that I'm coming up with tonight. And I'll try and justify the slide that I've put Aberargie on. Evening Barflies and Aquaviti, says Pedro. Good to see you, buddy, over from, always tuning in from Brazil. I love having you here. Thanks for joining us again tonight. And Trippleberg is saying, 15 years ago, Talisker 10 was my go-to whiskey. That's sad to hear. Well, why was it 15 years ago as well, Trippleberg? Or Hoyt. It is Hoyt, isn't it? I always second guess myself with these names. Is it? Maybe I feel like, okay, let's go with it. Why was it 15 years ago, and why is it not your favourite today? Have you had the same experience as us? Have we moved on? Have we just become bored of Talisker? Or could we pick up a Talisker 10 from 10 years ago? And I mean as recently as 10 years ago. It's not like one of these you go back to the 90s or the 80s. Even 10 years ago, Talisker, you're going to notice a difference. And it's got so much to do with the cask makeup these days. Kind of much more leaning towards, I think, much more active first fill casks. Just my opinion. Yep, it's Hoyt. So thanks, Frank. Thanks for chiming in. And Scott is saying, are Wireworks too young? Because they are great. Wireworks is in my glass right now. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school if I was to suggest to you that I agree with you that they're great and know they are not too young, and that they might be getting mentioned before the end of this vPub this evening. So if you like a wee bit of Wireworks, hang about. Got a bit of an uncorking. Scott, cheers. So because of my rushing and being late tonight, I need to pick carefully and work out how I want to go about this. I want to open that tonight. So that's a definite. I want to open that tonight. That's a definite. So we'll put that up there. I'm not sure I want to open that. I'm going to have to pick one. I could pick Ardnahoe. I could pick any of these. I'm going to have to pick one from the successes. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick one that I would recommend to you potentially joint first with all of the whiskies that I just listed on that screen. So if somebody was to come to me and say, Roy, heard you talking about those successful new distilleries, the ones that you feel have been a success. What would you recommend? Where would I start? For 45 quid, 48 quid, 49.50, maybe some places independent specialists will charge you £50 for a privilege. But you can get this cheaper now. This is available from lots of online retailers, lots of the big shipping places, shipping houses, Bezos's Big Box of Blue, etc., etc. But I recommend that you go to a spirit specialist and you support them and you pay your 48, your 50 quid or whatever for this bottle and you enjoy it. This is probably close to, and it remains my pick of the range. This distillery is going to get to the point where we will have some super mature product in the future, and that will start to shade this for me. But I've never purchased a bottle of this and been anything other than delighted. I bang on about it all the time. Sorry if Roy is becoming a dull boy, but I'm speaking about Ardnamurchan's AD. This is the standard core range from Ardnamurchan, 46.8% ABV, I think the bottle this at, yes. And if we talk about transparency and integrity and all of these kind of open things, just scan this wee QR code on the back, and you can access all the information that you could ever dream of. I simply go down to the maturation, open up, download a wee PDF sheet, and it tells me that my particular bottle is made up, this particular bottle, remember, of 48 quid, 50 quid, is made up of 7 and 8 year old peated and unpeated Ardnamurchan malt whiskey. There's no age statement on the labelling on the bottle, but if we want to do some digging and look into this, they'll release all the behind the scenes data. and they're in no breach of any legislation whatsoever. They are completely above board. They have cracked the transparency nut. We can ask Ardnamurchan for nothing more, I believe. If we want to taste Ardnamurchan heavily peated, unpeated, if we want to taste Ardnamurchan from Sauterne, from Madeira, from Sherry, if we want to taste it at cask strength, if we want to taste heritage grain, if we want to taste a 10-year age statement, if we want to taste it from PX, from Oloroso, from Amontillado, from, yeah, it just goes on and on and on. There's Ardnamurchan out there, official bottlings of, and independent bottlings of, because they're also very collaborative and open as well, that you can try. You can slice and dice and cut and interact with Ardnamurchan any way you like, and we cannot help but coming away with the same opinion that they are endlessly interesting and infinitely high on quality. It's super reassuring that that can be done. I genuinely hope that Ardnamurchan as a business is super successful as well. From the outside looking in, the people that they employ, the ideas that they have, the developments, the collaborations, the products they come out with, the continual churn of positivity that come from them. I hope that that feels like it's the case. Black Cullen is saying, Talisker, I think the sky is better than the 10. Talisker was my introduction to single malts, and it's not what it used to be, says Black Cullen, 28 years ago. Yeah. You're having a wee laugh at yourself because you're realising you're admitting to 28 years ago, eh? When you started to get into whiskey, Scotland we had no fear about being at a World Cup. It was just something that we did. We didn't realise it would take 28 years to get back. Sorry, I've derailed it into football again. White is saying, yep, it doesn't seem the same the last few years. He's agreeing. And Black Fen, good to see you, buddy. He's saying, are the English too old? I believe they were founded in 2006. Yeah, the English distillery, I would say that I have picked one English distillery to talk about tonight, and it's going to come at the end. All the stats that I've shared with you, all the categories I'm going to pull up, I've focused on Scotch whisky, and I think everybody knows that that's where my comfort zone is. That's where I spend most of my time. But I am also quite open. I don't have I've always had this kind of curiosity, this wide-angled, can I grab this and grab that? Even if it just reassures me that the center, my focus is the right place for it to be. But sometimes when I grab things just left and right of my focus fields, you know, it can take me in directions, and it can make me realize things that I think puts me in a better position to understand Scotch whisky. I hope that makes sense, to critique it, to compare it and contrast it. And I think that there are some English producers, Irish producers, American producers, European producers, Japanese, wherever you look, that are doing a good job of making us sit up and pay attention. I'm going to bring an example of that a wee bit tonight. Pdram is saying the Ardnamurchan AD is pretty much a blueprint for a quality bottling of a new distillery. Awesome stuff. I agree with that, and I think that was the point I was trying to make. If we take this on from, is the recipe that simple? This is the recipe. If you do this right, and everything else, this is your anchor. This is your cornerstone. Now, we walk in and we just see this on the shelf. Back when it was first launched, it disappeared quickly. It sold out. Now we see it on the shelf and it becomes a bit ubiquitous. And I think sometimes we can take our eye off it and consider it a bit pedestrian. It is anything but. It is beautifully coastal, beautifully. I have to be careful here. Ardnamurchan AD is something that somebody brand new into whiskey could sit down and enjoy. Absolutely. I don't know if it would be easy to recommend it and get the reaction back that we get as somebody that sounds snobbery. I don't mean to sound it like that. But if you've been into whiskey a while, you can taste this and you can appreciate the balance of peat. You can appreciate that outdoor coastal quality, the kind of mineralic side of things. And all of these complexities, let's say, that make you think about more than maybe the creamy, the malt, the fruit, that type of thing. There's multiple dimensions to Ardnamurchan. It's a dry whiskey. The peat helps that. The coastal quality helps that. The minerality helps that. the kind of malt spirit forward character of it gives it this kind of dry outdoor vibe. But I think that's what its strength is. We've also discovered that it's quite a robust spirit and does very, very well in almost any kind of good quality wood that you put it in. What say you? Have I been a little bit kind to some distilleries in that first slide? Gene Kelly saying, fortunately for me, the core AD is only $56 here, a supreme bargain. Fantastic that you have it as well, in a very, very fair price. Henrik Schmidt is saying, Ardnamurchan ex Isla pick by a fellow YouTuber. Ex Isla pick by a fellow YouTuber. Is that an Ardnamurchan ex Isla cask? What is that, Henrik? I'm sorry that I'm not following you, buddy. I'm being a wee bit dim tonight, perhaps. My friend David Barnes is saying, Aquaviti, we need a bit more balance to this vPub tonight. England also has won this week, lol. I know. Listen, I would also go one further than that. The England-Croatia game is probably the most entertaining game in the World Cup so far that I've watched live. I know there's been other really entertaining games as well. Japan had a great game. There's been a few others. The United States had a great game. But the one that I've actually sat and enjoyed and watched live was the England-Croatia game. I think it was a good, entertaining game. Sorry, we're talking about football again. Ian Bruce is saying, good evening, Barflies and Roy. Hopefully we see the likes of Talisker, etc. look back and return to some great bottlings. Agree with all the distilleries on the list, Roy. Thank you, Ian. And Whiskey with Molly saying, Aquaviti, not their fault. But Dornoch is hard to get and probably lucky to make that list for that reason. Great whiskey, but how many of the Barflies have access to it? I would say you're absolutely right. However, it is balloted. So while you can't just guarantee to be quick and get your hands on a bottle, it's not impossible. You can get it through. You do have to go through ballot. You do have to have your eyes on your email feed and things like that. And as time is going on, we are able to get our hands on Dornoch. But what we're talking about when we talk about Dornoch is something that's verging on a micro distillery, right? We've done a vPub from there. I was able to stand in one spot and do a 360-degree turn and see everything in the distillery. It's tiny. So we have to be realistic. What we would like to see is then to take that success, Ben, right, and apply that, try and upscale it to something similar when they do the Struy project. This year's in the future, but it's still exciting times. There's a couple of bottles that I want to open and share with you tonight. Potentially 3. I've got 4 sealed bottles here, and I think I'm going to open about 3 of them this evening with you. And if I open 3 of them, I would suggest that 2, if I open 4, it would be 3 out of 4, that don't get a lot of limelight on the vPub. And I want to state that it is not because I don't like the whiskey or I don't care about the whiskey, but it's potentially because I've not always understood the whiskey. So before I open one of them, let me share with you what I would consider. So we've got 26 distilleries to get through, right? 8 of them are successes. So that leaves 18 left, and that splits into 8 possibles, and unfortunately 10 distilleries, brands that I figure, from my perspective, are just unintelligibles. I just don't understand what they're trying to make, what they're trying to do. But before I get to those, I'm going to list with you what I consider to be possibles, potentials, things that have genuinely attracted attention, but for some reason, not always their fault, by the way, just where they are in their arc, their journey, for some reason, they're still just in that kind of state of limbo that I don't think that we're all ready to, as a community, embrace it as a big success. We're still waiting to see what they do. Strategy, price, integrity, earnest, first foot forward, all of that stuff. So let's get this back up on screen for you again. In order for you to see this, these I'm going to list with you now are what I consider, again, the caveat, this is my opinion, a little garnish of community. consensus as well, of course, but this is my opinion, and these are the possibles. Ones that could potentially be there or thereabouts. Let's start with Aberargie. It's already been mentioned. They've been going since 2017, held themselves very, very close. I could reach out and actually grab a bottle of Aberargie, actually, that I'm quite enjoying. I think it's a fantastic debut whiskey. But the reason that they remain on the possibles list is that it remains an inaugural. We've only had one shout from them, and they went very safe. I think that the way they made that whiskey up was to make it as mass market interesting as possible, and that just makes sense to me. But in future, I think the thing that's really going to get us to understand Aberargie is that we're going to be able to try them from a sherry cask, from other kind of interesting wine casks like Madeira or Amontillado sherry, and potentially lovely, crisp, clean expressions from first fill, bourbon, maybe even refill in the future as well. I am very confident. I think that Aberargie could end up being a favoured distillery by our community in the very near future. But with only one release out there just now, as we speak in 2026, my apologies, they remain on the possibles list. Then we have Ballindalach. Now, let me put my hand on my heart and say I've had at least 2 bottles from Ballindalach that I would consider not just good, but exceptional. But I've also got a couple of bottles from Ballindalach that I would also consider I don't feel I got my value from them. And I think Ballindalach's problem right now is that everything I touch seems to be 100 quid. Everything that's interesting seems to be 100 quid. Even what's the Castle release just now? It's in there at Good Spirits Company just now. I've always been tempted, but it's sitting at £95, and I don't care that you get a free book with it. I don't care the reason for the collaboration. I'm just there for the liquid inside that Ballindalach, and I feel that £95 is too expensive. That said, I have bought 2 £100 bottles of Ballindalach that were both only 7 years old, but it was a try before I bought on both occasions, and they were fabulous. But these were single casks. The higher VAT and stuff, I think Ballindalach needs to find a keener price point and an anchor that we can connect with. Clydeside, they're coming into their own now. They really are. I'm speaking very positively about Clydeside. I love to use the Fortnight against other peated blind whiskies. I think there's a nice edge to that. I think there's a depth to it. I think there's a quality that when we sip it blind and we know what we're drinking, we don't pick up on. I think the Napier is 6-year age stated, 41, 42 pounds a bottle, fully matured in sherry casks is a rare thing indeed for a single malt whiskey. So the pricing is there as well. They've also got Stobcross. They've got cask strength. They've always got something exclusive in the distillery. They're starting to come into their stride, but I feel strongly that the Clydeside Spirit needs a bit of time. They are strong possibilities for me. Then we've got Glenwivis in the Highlands. Now, I was super excited when I had a batch of Glenwivis, and it's one of the bottles that I was going to open tonight. Let's have a wee look at this up here. I'm nervous about this bottle. This is a 2018 Glenwivis, and I used this in a blind tasting, and it went very, very well. I remember there was a couple of people really impressed with it. Julie Hamilton was super excited by it, and it was because of that lovely, lovely tropicality, that really clean, bright, fruit-forward, that kind of fermentation-laden distillate that it was. We all loved it. However, when I was ordering it in a bar, it didn't taste like that at all, and I worked out that the batches were different. So my difficulty with Glenwivis is that you can go in and you can buy this blue label, and it can look very, very similar. The price can be the same, the strength and all the rest of it is 46.5% ABV. But then you look at it again, and you realize that it's kind of all over the place. The batches are really quite different. So we've got a combination here of different batches from with a mix of vintages. This is the 2018 vintage. And I think what they are doing here is that they're it's almost like a work in progress type selection for us. The label changes color. It's a different vintage distillation year, short outturn bottles, and when they sell out, they sell out. This particular batch is the 0218 batch, which was 8,000 bottles bottled in 2022. So the best that this can be is 4 years old, potentially 3 years old. If this is the same as that original one I used in a blind challenge, fantastic. I'll be very, very happy. But I went out and bought it and then suddenly became nervous. Oh, is this a different batch? Is I going to get a different experience? So we need to wait and see. This is actually tells you on the back that it's batch 2 of the 2018 vintage distillation. And I don't remember, unfortunately, I don't remember what the blind tasting bottle was. But this remains something that's going to get uncorked someday very, very soon. But I don't think tonight, because there is one that I'm going to uncork instead, and it's going to appear in this wee list. Because if we carry on in this list, next up we've got Harris, Isle of Harris. Now, why is this on the possibles list? Well, for me, I'll be honest, I've only spent any time with one of the batches of the original kind of when they flooded the market with umpteen batches, and I don't even remember which batch I've got now. It could be anything from 8 to 16, or don't even remember now, but one of the original ones, and also bought and picked up the sherry cask as well. And for as nice as they both were, I felt they were both a bit safe and a bit vanilla and right in the middle of the flavour map. And that wasn't what I was expecting from a Western Island distillery. I was looking for a wee bit more character. So it might just mean that Harris needs a bit more time, or a bit more time to show us the character of their whiskey. For me, it was a little bit safe, is a polite word, but potentially bland. I know that that's not popular, and there is lots and lots of people out there in the community that are loving their time with Harris. It's just my take on it. It's not meant to be a hot take. It's meant to be an honest take. Then we have Lindors. Gone around since 2017. Up and down, some controversies along the way. Fife Lowland Distillery. Lots and lots of whiskies and batches out there. And for everything that I've loved from them, I've always felt that there's something just a wee bit kind of, I couldn't quite put my finger on why I wasn't connecting with it. But I'm going to give them a chance this evening. The bottle that I'm about to uncork will be an expression from Lindors. Then we've got Strathearn. Been around since 2015. Strathearn have been kind of one of these kind of fits and bursts and starts, but they're owned by Douglas Laing now. And Douglas Laing 2 years ago, or was it last year, the year before? Don't remember now. Maybe it was 2025. Strathearn released what they called their inaugural, even though previous owners of Strathearn had released whiskies. But it was the inaugural under Douglas Laing's stewardship, and I loved it. And I still love it. I think it's an excellent whiskey. However, they've only released that one bottle. It was a bit salty on price, and we haven't seen enough to decide how we feel about it yet. That's my honest feeling. And finally, we'll wrap up this list with Wolfburn, way up there in the north, going around since 2013 now. So as you know, last year I opened or was it earlier this year, a 12-year-old Wolfburn we opened up on the vPub. And I have to say the 12-year-old is the best, objectively the best whiskey I've had from them, the most together whiskey. I know they've had a few interesting limited editions, smaller outturns, even single casks that people have raved about. But for me, the 12 was them just seeming like they were starting to get some identity and depth of quality. So my eye is open to Wolfburn, but I'm not yet ready to jump in and declare them personally, just me, a success. So there we have it. I wonder if you would agree or disagree with that wee list. But there you go, Whisk with Molly saying that Glenlivet was lovely. Do you remember it, buddy? Doodle Dramarney saying Clydeside are my work neighbours across the river. I wish I could connect with them a bit more, but everything I've tried so far left me feeling like the spirit is a touch aggressive. And I think that is true because, I mean, the oldest that we're getting from them, despite their age now, is maybe 6 years old. A grain of malt saying picked up an excellent Glenlivet bottled for Highlander Inn. Cracking dram. Tried it at the Highlander Inn last year and found a bottle in Limburg this year. Little hesitation. That's what we need. That type of reassurance that experience we had with the 2018 vintage originally in the blind tasting was not a one-off, and they're capable of making that lovely, lovely spirit in the future. Doodle Ramsey, and I wonder where your beloved Annandale is going to land on your list. Well, I tell you, it's no spoilers, is it? If it meets the criteria for tonight, and it's not appeared on the successes, and it's not appeared on the possibles, there's only one list it can appear on, right? Okay. The bottle I'm going to open tonight is from Lindors. I've opened the 1494. It doesn't say 1494 on the label. It says it in Roman numerals, of course. There's lots of iconography and nods to the past, and like kind of leveraging of dates and things to do with ABV. And there's lots of things that Lindors does to talk about heritage and things like that. And it's all very great, and it's great to connect with the history and the story that you can tell about Friar John Corr and the first ever recorded in 1494, the first ever recorded line in history of Scotch malt whiskey being made in Scotland in the late 15th century. All of that is great, but at the end of the day, you're making a product in the 2020s, you're putting it into a bottle and you're competing with a ton of other things, that other people that are doing the exact same. And if you rely too much on the fact that you've got that history as being the thing that differentiates you, I think it's quite thin. I think it's actually it's a wonderful thing, a great story to tell, but when it comes to the actual interaction and the repeat buys of the bottles, I think it's quite thin. Anyway, let's get this open. I've opened other Lindors in the past. I'm looking over to my Lowland section to give me some prompts. I think I've got a single cask over there. I've got something that's looking a bit darker as well. I can't recall. So it has appeared, but it's quite a rare appearance on the vPub. Let's get it in. I suspect there's no going to be a glug because it's rounded shoulders. Let's see. Oh, not bad. A wee glug there. So what do we have? Well, we have a big bruiser from Lindors here. We have, now this was a wee bit pricey. I think I was up at £79 for this. I would have to check the receipt. I don't have on hand. I think it was quite pricey. Let's do a quick internet search because I get caught out sometimes just shouting about price. Now this is the third chapter of this. Chapter 3. Yeah, we're talking about somewhere in the rates. A couple of places I've got it a wee bit cheaper than that, of course, as you tend to find with these things. But it looks at, let's say, retail for chapter 3 of Friar John Corr is about the 80 quid mark. Now, it's quite expensive. I don't have my phone. I don't know where my phone is tonight because I was running around like a maniac. So unfortunately, I can't scan the QR code. Maybe the QR code is for more information. Maybe it's transparency. Maybe it's just a link to the website, that type of thing. But this Friar John Corr, this chapter 3 Friar John Corr is cask strength, and it is using ex-bourbon casks, ex-amontillado, and ex-PX sherry. It tells us where the barley is from, which is really nice. And there are signatures on there from the distillery manager and the founder himself. This Friar John Corr, I tasted the first expression when it came out back at the Fife Whisky Festival a few years back. I felt it was really quite interesting, quite full on flavours. I think they dial everything up to 11 for this one and not just the ABV, which on this particular expression is 60.2. So let's get this around the glass. I'm just coating the glass there. See what we've got on this one. Usual caveats. Okay, this is an uncorking. It's a neck pour. The bottle is settled. It's been around. There's no bottle shock here. It's not freshly delivered. But it is nosing a little bit tight. The nose I am getting is a darker nose. It's rich. It's just a little bit tight. I might just reach out for a wee bit of water for this one after a first sip. It's very fruit forward. juicy, red, ripe, and some nice, warm kitchen spice. I have to say, the nose is wood-driven, oak-driven. That's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. 60.3%, it's pretty easy to get my nose in there. Not a huge amount of raw alcohol, but there is a heat and there is an edge, and it is high ABV. It makes itself known, but it's not aggressive. Let's have a wee sip. Cheers, everyone. The ABV is there. Wow, both. This is big, loud. It's a bruiser, an absolute bruiser. A big, dry, spiced, wood-forward arrival. I'm going to struggle to get into the malt here. I'm going to struggle to get into the spirit. It is very wood-driven. It is very spicy. It's very red. Everything is red here on the palate. So we're thinking red, warm, earth, and spice. We're getting some on the nose. There was a suggestion of some ripe fruit and some sweetness there, but on the palate, it's very spice driven and dried fruit. In fact, it's a dry experience. The finish is dry. And another sip, neat. Densely flavored. Big and bold and rich. Let's try just a wee bit of water in this. I've got my wee fancy Stefan Novak water dropper that I've been using recently that I'm quite enjoying. It helps me just put a wee controlled amount of water in. Oh, and it's clouding up nicely there. I don't know if you can spot that. I don't know if you can see it in the camera there. This water is not cold, it's room temperature. This is bringing a wee bit of fruit to the forward now. This is softening things a little bit. I've still got that spice. Maybe even the spice has been exaggerated a wee bit, but it's in the cinnamon nutmeg realm. But we've got sweet fruit now, sweet orchard, sweet citrus, sweet orange. Dried fruits are still there too, though. It's very easy to think of a fruit and make it fit. Sweet, though. So I'm drawn away from, I'm looking for PX in this. I know there's PX, but that's not, I think I'm drawn more towards a more an Amontillado vibe. I think the water has maybe brought a little bit of the bourbon casks to the front, but nothing is particularly expressive. I've not got that gloopy, syrupy PX sherry character here. Juicy now. This needs water. Should be obvious. 60.3% ABV written on the label, I think. 60.2, sorry, my apologies. 60.2% ABV, it makes no difference. It is telling you that you're getting a cask strength whiskey here, and it's probably going to be encouraging you to play with it a wee bit. Why would you not just buy a core range at 49.4%, isn't it, the ABV for Lindors? Why would you not buy one of those? Well, you would buy the cask strength because you get to have fun at home. You can add just a couple of drops of water and see how that changes and switch things up. Or you can go heavy and add in a couple of teaspoons or a tablespoon of water, dilute it quite heavily, and see how it changes things up. And you get a much nicer spectrum than you would if you bought it at 49.4 and you could only dilute down from there. This is fun whiskey. This is playful whiskey. This is big, thick, heavy, dense whiskey that you get to dilute down from high ABV. Wow, does it change? Does it make it a much nicer prospect? So now you're suddenly looking at this and saying, wait a minute, I've got 60.2% ABV whiskey here. If I'm happy to add wee teaspoons and things like that, the value of this is a wee bit better. Instead of being a limited edition, it's £79.80. We don't know what the non-age statement, of course. You know, it's because we're getting so much more value by the amount of, I just realised what I'm sitting on. It's sticking into my, I'm sitting on my wife's scorecard from the golf. This is twice the whiskey with a bit of water in it. Everything's rounder, juicier. I'm going to go further. It's the best Lindors I've had. Needed a wee bit of water. I'm probably going to have it when it's not the neck pour, when it's had a wee bit of time to breathe a little bit. Another wee pour, another wee bit of water. I think this is going to be a nice kind of watching the football type whiskey, just sitting there. It's because of the high ABV, because it's quite dense, because there's a lot of flavour there. Whether it's wood forward or spirit forward, it matters not. It's going to hang around, it clings on the palate nicely. Does very, very well to come alive with a wee splash of water in it, remarkably so. However, here's the crux of it. I put this on my possibles list. Lindors is a distillery. Does the Friar John Corr help me take it away from that list and put it on a success list? Or does it damage it and put it into the Unintelligibles? No, it stays in that kind of almost Lindors limbo of I'm not quite there yet. I don't have the same understanding of the whiskey that I do from an Ardnahoe, an Ardnamurchan, a Lochlee. I still feel slightly detached from it. That could be entirely my problem, of course. But I don't think this whiskey is helping me. I feel fairly comfortable that I spent £79 on this bottle, but I don't feel happy about it. It's cask strength, fair enough, but we need to be down at 65, 68, 69 for me to feel happy. And I think we need to, what's in the experience, what's in the glass here, 65 and less for me to be able to start recommending it. And at that point, start to exploring it a wee bit more. And, you know, the other whiskies in the range to be a little bit more kind of price attenuated. It might be difficult for them to do that. The size, the scale, the business, the shape, the structure that they have, this might need to be the price of the whiskey. Fine, I understand that. But you're not a Daftmill. You're not selling 12, 15-year-old plus whiskies. You're not able to do what Dornoch are doing. It's not the most scarce and in-demand whiskey on the planet. You are literally in limbo. You need to find ways to step out, to engage, to have a bit of character, to have something that people will chat about. Now, maybe from their perspective, the way they're viewing the world, they've got a rock-solid community. They're doing very well looking after their community, their outlets, their everything. But this is also a distillery that I think is distributed maybe just in the UK by Disaronno, which is weird. It just seems an odd route for it to find its to go to market. Anyway, their business is their business. The whiskey is my whiskey. I paid £79 for this. I'm not upset, but it's not easy for me to recommend it. It's not one that I can take off the possibles list and move it in either direction quite yet. So it's good news in one respect, but not great in another. Still, I'm looking forward to sipping this on the couch in front of some football. Take from that what you will. Need to scroll back a wee bit. Inverurie Whisky Shop has joined Aquavitae Barflies. Mike, I thought you already were a member, but thank you for the support. You and all the other Barflies are keeping all the content completely ad-free, and in return, you get your wee loyalty badges and your channel-themed emoji, and always gratitude and thanks from me. Friar John Corr Batch 1 from Lindors was great, Aquavitae. That's the one I remember. But even back then, I remember it being pricey, and that's what put me off. That's when I tried at Fife. P.T. Dram Craig is saying the Clydeside 2026 special edition was an 8-year-old. so they are aging more rapidly than you may think. I've connected with the distillery, but still feel much of it needs a bit more time. That's right. It was a weird one because the website told us all that the 2026 edition was an 8-year-old. But there was not a mention on the outer carton or the bottle from Clyde's side that it was 8-year-old whiskey, which is weird. Bowman 1989 Rob is saying, shout about the price all you want. Thank you, buddy. I have to. It's the way I'm built. It's just the nature of it. And David is saying, I may even agree with that order. But if that Aberargie is their mass market low offence statement, hold your perils. I don't doubt, and we need to stay as open-minded as possible. And think about how if we did this list way back when Glasgow had just released their first releases, they would be on potentially the unintelligible list, right? And look, now they're on a success list. Whiskey with Molly Ben is saying, with my 1494 members discount, I don't have this price issue. Okay, so they're maybe looking after their immediate folk, the people that support them, which is not a bad thing. The Friar John Corey's saying exclusive is £59. Where did you buy this from? I bought this from Good Spirits Company. And what I should really do is check the price at Good Spirits Company, because then I would be telling the truth. I just type in Lindors when the search box comes up. Here we go. I'm speaking out of turn. At Good Spirits Company in Glasgow, I spent £70 for this. £70. So that does, I literally just asked for it to be 65 or 68. It does bring it a bit closer to that. So, take from that what you will. It does mean that we are closer to what I think is a fair price. It changes my appraisal. It genuinely does. It changes my appraisal of this whiskey. That's me saving potentially £10 a bottle. It's really not insignificant. Does it change it from the possibles list to a success list? Unfortunately, not yet. Ben, you've probably got more insight from me because, my friend, you are coming at this from being part of the Invested 1494 fan club. So you can let me a wee bit more. But there you go. If you're getting that at £59 and it's not costing you anything to join that 1494 club, then that's suddenly a very interesting product. There, Hearst 26, Lindors Abbey is £60. I don't remember anything. It's 79. Roddy did a little gouge job on you there. Good for him. Absolutely not. I've just checked on the website. I need to do my research. I'll fall back on the excuse about me being 15 minutes late tonight. I was rushing. So yeah, I bought this from Good Spirits at 70 quid. Ahoy Maltmate says, Everwind, nice to have you in, buddy. Always good to have you, Chris, and I'm glad to have you here tonight. So suddenly, let's be honest about this. Does it make it something I can recommend? Do you know what? It's 70 quid and certainly £59 that Ben's able to get it for, or anywhere in between. For anybody that loves kind of big, bold, kind of cask forward type whiskies, and there's loads and loads of friends that I have out there. There's a few popping into my mind right now. Those type of people, I could suggest to them, have you tried that? And then it does become something that you can recommend. Goes to show a lot for getting your facts right before you go live. Goes to show a lot for being on time and not being in a rush before you go live, right? Whiskey with Molly saying the 1494 was £500, one-off cost, but 10% discount, a free tour a year for life, and a free invite to the Burning Bear Festival for life, plus members-only bottlings. One of the best £500 I've spent. Okay. Wow. So that was the 1494 club, was a £500 one-off cost. Yeah, I would struggle. I'm glad that you're feeling like you got a lot of value out of that. Personally, I would struggle, I think. But fair play to you. And more football chat. Graham Young is saying Canada is up 2-0. Jonathan Davis scores. Who are Canada playing tonight? I've forgotten already. And there we fall back. It's, you know, in the World Cup, luckily it only happens every 4 years, right? Canada versus Qatar. Wow. Anyway, back to new distilleries, because I've still got to share with you. I've got two more bottles I'm going to open, and one of them lands on the Unintelligibles list, and yet I bought a bottle this week. I bought it from Good Spirits Company, so I'm going to check the price, double check the price before I even mention it to you. I could be getting confused because this one cost me £79. It's going to be interesting to try it. But let me first share with you, and this is where things get brutal. So if I'm going to list 10, we've got 8 that I'm suggesting to your successes, 8 that I'm suggesting to your remain possibles. So the 26 distilleries, that leaves 10 that I'm telling you I'm going to share with you tonight and say, to me, they are unintelligibles. I've not been able to understand, to connect with, and I'm certainly not in a position for any of these 10 new Scotch malt whiskey distilleries to be able to easily recommend them. Fair Night Walker saying, talk about football. Which bottle would you open if Scotland beat Brazil? All of them. Any. I would be in a state of not caring one jot. I would be singing. I would be jumping around. I would be making my kids very uncomfortable. I would be very, very happy. The chances are very, very unlikely. Listen, right now, I would take 1 point. I would take just 1 point from the next 2 games and be a very happy bunny. Anyway, let's keep it on whiskey. Let me share with you my unintelligibles. Please remember, these are my personal opinions. I do think that the vibe does reflect a little bit of what the community, my peers, my pals feel about these distilleries. The important thing is, if you do disagree, the comment section is there. If you're in here live, of course, you can interact. But afterwards, if you're watching this on the repeat, thank you so much. Leave a wee like, whatever, if you can, if you feel that you are enjoying this. But if you do want to interact, put it in the comments below. Not only does it mean that I've got an opportunity to come back and say, oh yeah, fair enough, but you're giving more context to anybody that watches this video in the future. Anyway, here are my 10 unintelligibles. Now, bear in mind, this is newer than Kilchoman, Kilchoman, Daftmill, but old enough to be capable of releasing somewhere in the order of 8-year-old whiskey today. No longer new distilleries. First up on the list is going to be, I don't know if this is obvious to everyone, but we just don't know if they're still producing, if they're not producing, if they're just doing really small batch. Whoops, I've hit that far too fast there. We just don't know what's going on with Avonjarek. I've had such odd experiences with them, but there is one up there that is still one of my most odd whiskies, a gift from Sandy McDonald. Still have a wee drop of it left. It's their Madeira cask. High ABV. It's unique, and I've come to appreciate and love it, but it remains such an odd, volatile distillery that listen, it hardly appears on anybody's radar. Buying it is very difficult. Even if you did an internet search and you were able to find the 10 or some single cask or whatever it is, you know, there's no way. You would have to do some serious research before you pulled the trigger. But for the completists out there, you can find malt from Avenjarrick. I would encourage you to pick it up and try it, but it's not one that I could recommend to anybody interested in exploring. It's still a bit volatile, and it can be really quite challenging at times as well. Ailsa Bay. Now, I have to be honest, they've had a couple of releases over the years, and all of them have been very, very safe, very good even. The most recent one that I've tried, and I think I've still got some on the shelf, was the Sweet Smoke. And it is completely safe, completely decent, good drinking whiskey, but it doesn't seem to have any real strategy behind it. Ailsa Bay seems to exist purely to provide malt for blends, which is fine. So there doesn't seem to be like a core range that they are developing or promoting. And if they are, they don't seem to be doing it domestically in the UK. They're kind of bit part players that appear now and again, and it's difficult to, they're just not in our lexicon. They're not part of the zeitgeist. They're nowhere. They're here and then they're gone again. And then a couple of years later, we get another one, and it's just strange. So I still don't know what's happening at Ailsa Bay. I don't know what the mission from a single malt perspective is from them. So again, it's on the Unintelligibles list. Annandale also make that list. Of course they do. Annandale still seem to be in a weird position where their core range is made up of single casks. Now, if you had whiskey that was so reliable, every cask that you put it into was fantastic, or you had such tight quality controls that you'd never put out a cask that was anything other than fantastic, you can get away with that, whether it's Mana Swords, which is their peated, or Mana Words, which is their unpeated. But that doesn't seem to be the case with Annandale. I think they need to spend some time and forgetting about the single cask strength stuff. They need to get some core ranges made and developed, something a bit more of an anchor with a bit more consistency, a bit more of a blending intelligence and influence in there, blending of things together to make very, very good, enjoyable product. Make it as transparent as they can be, keep it as natural, and price it fairly. None of that's been achieved so far, so it's easy for me not to admit to not being able to understand what's happening at Annandale. Arbicki, I'm not even going to dwell on this right now, because Arbicki's strategy is just to seem to be to take as much money as possible from anybody that's stupid enough to give them it. Before, I've tried Arbicki by the dram only. I've never purchased a bottle of it. I've always been curious. I've always felt like the completist in me wants an Arbicki on the shelf, but I've never had one. And the prices that they're asking, I'm unlikely to ever have one unless something changes at their side. On paper, it reads like a fantastic, right up Geek Street distillery, but everything that they do out in the marketplace makes it very, very difficult for us to even consider them. Nobody's talking about Arbicki, not in our community, not in our circles. We're just not. They appeared at the Independent Spirits Festival in March this year, and I was desperate to go over and speak to them and say, what are you all about? Unfortunately, I couldn't get away from my own table. It was very difficult. So if they continue to go to festivals, I'll maybe get a chance to speak to them. But right now, it's a shame. It's just unintelligible what they're doing to me. Borders. I've been around since 2017 now. They've started to release some really interesting whiskies. We're talking about malt, we're talking about rye, we're talking about quite interesting things that they're making. Unfortunately, it's all fallen apart. The wheels come off because what they are bottling doesn't let us taste that. What they're bottling seems to be a tourist market-produced 40% ABV, watered down, must therefore be, we assume, chill filtered. But anyway, very, very watery, very, very weak. A lot of the integrity, structure, texture, potentially mouthfeel, complexity, all of the stuff that we love in integrity forward natural whiskies has been lost. So whether it's Right as Rain or whether it's what other borders do I have down there, I can't see them, just out of reach right now. There's a couple of Borders distilleries that they've even featured on vPubs in the past. None of them I've been happy to have purchased, even though the prices are very, very fair. We'll pay more for better quality, please. Next up, Dalmunnock. Listen, this is an easy one. to just keep on the unintelligibles, you can get single casks from independent bottlers of Dalmonic. You can get distillery exclusives from Pernod Ricard distillery visitor centres of Dalmonic, and you might find something that's really quite tasty and delicious. But the truth is, Dalmonic exists for one reason only, to provide malt for blends for Pernod Ricard, and that is okay. But for now, until we see an official release or something that's curated, it remains something that's just ever so slightly nebulous for us. Eden Mill. They seemed to start with a strategy that was a bit more similar to Arbecky. They soon realised that they were struggling with that. Then they started to bring out things that were a bit more keenly priced. Unfortunately, they'd lost the attention of the room by that point, and they're going to need a long time to get that back again. I've got a sherry cask version over there from them. It's appeared on a previous vPub. It was fairly straightforward and safe and simple. It didn't set the heather alight. Still, they seem like they may be on the route to changing their attitudes and strategy a little bit, and encourage that, and maybe festivals will be able to meet in the future if they are willing to do such a thing. I can understand a wee bit more about what this Fife distillery is about. Then we've got another Fife distillery. We've got Inchdairnie. On paper, fabulous stuff. Making rye, making multiple different types of whiskey in a large-scale production. Really quite out there thinking, right up Geek Street. And yet the way that they're packaging and bringing it to market makes it so easy to ignore. It's like the fundamentals have just been tripped over at the end, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Then we've got Nicknean up there in the Highlands, the Western Highlands. I feel a wee bit guilty about this because I was a very, very vocal supporter of Nicknean when they first appeared. Loved the whole organic vibes, but there's questions out there. Are they truly organic? Is the casks that they use truly organic? These types of questions have popped up recently. They seem to be chasing a very kind of niche market involving I don't know, cocktails and this type of thing. And even when they bring out something like the Huntress series or whatever that's a bit more kind of geek focused, it still has this packaging thing going with it that seems to suggest it might not actually be for us. Maybe I'm being unfair. Right now, they're part of the West Highland Whisky Festival. I hope that they have a really successful event. I hope that a lot more people are able to connect with them and understand what they're doing. The recycled glass, the option of saving a bit of money if you don't have a cardboard tube, all of these interesting things that I found was really quite exciting when they first appeared. Their whiskey has always been just a little bit straight down the safe middle of the flavour map, and I've just never been able to connect with them. Finally, Rose Isle. Copy and paste Dalmonic here. However, on Rose Isle, we've now got three different special releases now from Rose Isle over the special releases from Diageo each year. And I have to say, it's beautiful whiskey. The problem is that Rose Isle, like Dalmonic, like lots of other big distilleries out there, also be included as well. They have the ability to make any whiskey you like, so they can just change things up, switch things up. They can change the distillation regime. They can change fermentation and yeast types, all that stuff. They can change cut points. They can what kind of barley they're using to be, what kind of peating levels. They can make any whiskey that's needed. That's what they're set up to do. So the Rose Isles that's been released so far are very, very safe and a very, very specific style, a style that I really enjoy. But the general distillery, what they exist for and how they exist as a single malt brand remains a bit of an unintelligible to me. I'm going to come back to the chat right now so that I can get some feedback from you guys, whether you think I'm a little bit out there. I hope that there are some kind of opinions out there that in some ways challenge mine a little bit. It's healthier that way. Ben Whiskey with Molly saying was on an Annandale tasting last week, and it really opened my eyes to the quality. They have vastly reduced pricing, and it's really good whiskey. So that's the first mentions of the community starting to, as you say, literally open your eyes. But now they're in a position where they've had to vastly reduce the prices. Now, are they still putting out there those single cask things? So you find a bottle, are you going to suggest you recommend it to me and you can only recommend that single cask? Or are you suggesting that you're a tasting and all the single casks were excellent and therefore we're going to find some of them? Everyone is saying perhaps they're following the mantra that they will not release whiskey until it's ready. If they're novices at picking and understanding cask maturation, that would make sense. No, I think everyone, Chris, is also talking about Annandale there, potentially. But it's not difficult to communicate these things. We're releasing this for this reason. So it's Pernod's Ben Rinnes, because that's what it reminds me of. If you're talking about Dalmunnock, Ben Rinnes, no, Ben Rinnes is made for a very, very specific kind of... Ben Rinnes has always been quite a robust malt. There's been times that I remember in the past, Ben Rinnes used to be recommended as a nice replacement for Mortlach when we lost the Mortlach 16-year-old, for example. Ben Rinnes was a 15-year-old. I didn't feel like that was an easy thing to say, I recommend one for the other. But I did understand because Ben Rinnes was quite a robust spirit, despite at one point in its life, up until about 2007, I believe, to be partially triple distilled. It's now double distilled. But it's quite a bold distillate. It's quite a robust distillate. And they are capable of making more than one whiskey there, of course. But it's not like an Ailsa Bay, a Dalmunnock, or a Rose Isle, where they can make literally anything. P-Dram is saying, got to head off to bed. I'll catch the rest on replay. Good night, all. P-Dram, thank you very much for dropping in tonight. Sorry that you'll miss the quiz at the end. And sorry that you'll miss me uncorking this wee bottle of whiskey. Because I'm going to go up to... I didn't get the other. I should grab the other. It doesn't matter. You know what it looks like. You can tell by this cork what I'm about to open. This is Kinglassie, which is actually a malt made at Inchdairnie Distillery. Inchdairnie's on the unintelligible list. And on the past, you've heard me raving on this vPub about their Rye Law, which was their Scotch take on rye whiskey. Honestly, a wonderful liquid. I loved it. I really loved it. It would have been very easy for me to rave about Rye Law if it was about 2/3 of the price. Because what we had was a very geek-driven product. So you talk about the grains, you talk about the vat and what made it a rye whiskey, why it doesn't say single malt on the bottle, that type of thing. And a lovely presentation and flavour-packed thing. But they put it in a gilded bottle, very expensive, and then in a metal can eventually, even more expense added to the packaging, rather than being a bit more honest and helping retailers and everybody out there that isn't, on a specific brand tasting to sell the product. They made it very, very difficult. They made it look expensive. They made it look like a gamble. That Inchdairnie was a gamble, and I'll tell you, it was a gamble for me as well, because it sat there for a long time before I finally decided to pick up a bottle. When I first tried that Inchdairnie Rye Law, I was super excited. And I couldn't wait for it to come out. But when I heard the price, it was easy for me to lose that excitement. And it was certainly easy for me to be in a position where I was not going to be able to recommend it to you guys. Clean glass. This is the Kinglassie 8-year-old, and you can tell by the black painted glass bottle that we're in here that we are in the realms of, it's quite high ABV, but it's below 50, I think. Where are we? 46.3, sorry. So it's 46.3. That suggests that it's natural. I know on the label it talks about, or it's maybe on the tin, it talks about it being natural, no added colour. I think you have to read that stuff on the tin. Non-chill filtered and no caramel added, it says, but it's on this tin. This tin's strange in itself. Not only is this quite, just a lot of packaging, but we've got this orange paper liner here. And if we take this out, which is easier said than done, we've got this kind of mesh metal thing, this see-through. I suppose we could use it as some kind of colland or something, or we can put, maybe it's too tall even for kitchen spoons and things like that. So I don't even know how we're maybe supposed to upcycle this thing. There's a wee sticker on this that tells us this is a 2017 raw release, 2017-2025 bottled. So we're looking at 8 years old, and it also comes along with an age statement. So we know that all the liquid in this release is 8 years old. What is raw? What is the Inchdairnie's Kinglassie raw. Well, this particular one is the peated example. Raw is peated. Tells us the vintage here, 2017, but it also tells us peatiness, 50 plus ppm. That's 50 plus phenols parts per million. Now that's in the malt. That's not necessarily the residual peat that's in the bottle. That's the malt spec, and the cask type is telling us ex-bourbon. So I am excited in some respects about this, because we're going to have not just raw in name, but raw by nature. We're going to have an 8-year-old, heavily peated, ex-bourbon only malt whiskey from Inchdairnie. All excellent. My problem is 79 quid. There are few 8-year-old whiskies that you're able to charge 79 quid for these days. Why is Kinglassie so expensive? Well, let's start with this cork. This cork weighs, I don't know what it weighs. It feels like about 200 grams. It weighs a lot. I think it's aluminium. I think it feels like metal. Could be something else. I'm not sure. But it's just, so it's not just the cost of this cork, but it's the cost of shipping all this extra weight and everything. The glass is exactly the same as the Rylaw, except this is painted black. So we've got this kind of King Arthur Excalibur type thing going on with it, and it's all very, very heavy. It does have a very nice premium feel. It is a pretty thing, but the glass is also super heavy. Wow, look how pale that is. Ex-bourbon, natural color, no color added. Very, very pale. Ooh. Okay. Let's let that breathe for a wee second. £79 for Kinglassie 8-year-old. Inchdairnie reads like a geek's dream to me. It's like the stuff that they could potentially release that would be unique, different, playful, interesting, potentially really flavorful in the Scotch whisky realm is exciting. But the strategy of the whiskies that's come out so far, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding brutal tonight, but the net result is a £79 bottle. That's the cheapest that they've released. The Inchdairnie Rylaw that I bought, which I think was 5 years old, more or less, it was 110. At least this is a bit cheaper. It noses very well. It noses a little bit like Southern Islay. So we're in the realms of a quite soft, gentle Lefroy, a Lagavulin 8, Ardbeg 10. You know, it's definitely in that realm. The peat is heavy. There's a bright, the reason I said wow when I first nosed it is that there's a bright, sharp, acidic lemon nose to it. Lemon rind, lemon pith. And it's salty. There's a salinity that I think is coming from the peat. Oh, slightly salt and vinegar even nature. Let's go even further. Almost like I don't know if anybody knows pickled onion Monster Munch, but there's a wee vibe of that to it. It's a corn snack in the UK. Pickled onion. Very savoury. There's just a wee edge of savoury. So it's heavily peated. Slightly floral, maybe a wee bit of outdoors, a dry aspect to the nose. It is a wee bit mouth-watering, I have to say. Cheers, everyone. Much softer than you expect on arrival. 46.3% ABV. I suppose that is a wee bit softer than what I've been sipping tonight. The arrival is very much like the nose, but the development through to the finish, we've got something slightly different going on here. There's almost like a slightly milky aspect to it, creaminess that develops. A soft salt and sour. I mean, this is going to, if you love your raw, pardon the pun, or raw is appropriate to use here. If you love your raw, peaty, clean, pure Islas, you're going to be drawn to this. But there is an edge, there is a wee slight difference to this. I have to say that just the way I'm sipping it tonight on that first sip, let's have another sip. I think I could pick this out. Sipping it against a Lagavulin and Ardbeg, Arnaho, that type of thing. The mouth feels good, despite 46.3% ABV. The palate is good. This is an interesting whiskey. It's a pure whiskey. Let's go back to that word that Jimmy likes again. It's earnest. This is a good whiskey. I don't feel sad to have this whiskey. I do feel sad that I paid £79 for it, and I'll explain why. We're in 2026 now, and if this is the style and profile of whiskey that you love, you can talk about how amazing your distillery is. You can talk about its location, you can talk about its history, you can talk about why it exists, you can talk about your mission, you can talk about everything that potentially even makes you unique. But at the end of the day, you're going to be sat on a shelf competing with your peers, and you're competing with other stories that are every bit as unique as yours, and you're competing with chatter. You're competing with the consensus of community. And when I talk about that community, I'm not just talking about the people that's hanging out in the lounge in the vPub tonight. I'm not talking about the people that go into Whiskey Base and leave scores. I'm not talking about the people that read Dramface. I'm not talking about the people that go to festivals. I'm talking about the people that go into a specialist retailer and ask and chitty chat and ask advice, because the people behind the counter of that specialist retailer are part of our community, and they're part of the zeitgeist. They're part of the chitty chat. And they start to be able to recommend products. And if they can understand a product and they know how it fits, they know how it competes with its peers, and they understand and they feel like they're offering value and something interesting and something that fits with the customer, everything is made easier. I think Inchdairnie, with the Kinglassie, with the Rylaw, with the raw, with the double matured, which is in a clear glass bottle, the exact same, a slightly cheaper price, slightly more expensive, don't remember, similar price. I think they've made it difficult for retailers. Because today, if somebody came into me and asked for a recommendation in this style, this flavour profile, do I take them to the Kinglassie 8-year-old and justify £79 a bottle? Or do I walk over to a Kalila Signature Vintage, 100 proof, much higher ABV, at £50 or less? Do I go to the plethora of independent bottlers offering something similar? Do I offer them an Ardbeg 10? Something completely ubiquitous and recognisable everywhere. A first step for so many. That's what they're competing with. That's what they're competing with. However, I'm going to tell you that it's even worse than that. It's much worse than that. Because today, in 2026, and all through the vPub tonight, I've focused fully on this little microcosm that is Scotch whisky, when the planet is planet whisky right now. And I know that a lot of the whiskey that's been produced in France or Ireland or Norway or Japan or whatever are looking after, first and foremost, domestic markets first. And that might not seem on the face of it much of a threat to all these new kind of Scotch whisky distilleries. But these Scotch whisky distilleries are trying to grow by maximising their domestic markets and their immediate neighbours, but by expanding their export markets. And all of these new distilleries that are coming along are potentially competing and cannibalising the sales for Scotch whisky. Cannibalising is the wrong word, but you understand what I mean. It's not just Scotch anymore. I'm going to share with you now a buy-on-site distillery. Everything that's come out from them, I have either purchased or felt very, very confident about purchasing, knowing that the chances of me being let down from any release from them is negligible. We've talked about unintelligibles tonight, we've talked about possibles, and we've talked about successes. The distillery I'm going to share with you now transcend the bottom two easily. No problem at all. They are, for me, a very, very, very powerful success. And the fact that the Scotch whisky lovers out there are not fully embracing them right now is the problem of the Scotch whisky consumer. So if I went to a specialist retailer in Glasgow or Edinburgh or Aberdeen or Dundee or whatever, it's unlikely I would find this whisky because it's difficult for them to sell it in Scotland. But it's not difficult for it to be sold in England. It's not difficult for it to be sold across Europe or elsewhere. And the quality that's coming from that distillery is astonishing. The whiskey I'm going to open from that distillery right now, can you tell what it is? We spoke about it earlier. I've never tried before. And I might have egg in my face and I might say, oh, okay, I don't doubt that this is going to be anything other than good whiskey, but it might not be for me. But I feel very strongly, based on the branding on this label and the feedback I've had from my immediate whiskey pals who tell me, no, get it, buy it, Roy, it's a peach, it's a belter. Some of those, one in particular, is a Scotsman, is a Scottish guy, but he's a bit more open-minded perhaps than most, and he's a bit more ready to embrace an English malt whiskey. But this is the latest release from Wireworks. This is the Kuduro X. Don't believe the online reels and things that's telling you that X means it's 10 years old. It's not. Kuduro X is just, this is an amalgamation of all the experimental stuff that they've been doing over the years. So if you think about the Petio, the little waters that they brought out, where they are using the reduction water that's actually cask aged diluted spirit down to 15% ABV. That's the reduction water that they're using. Fantastic concept. Then you've got the upards and the downards, you know, that idea of having the really high elevation maturation casks and the really low elevation, actually subterranean casks as well. And lots of other things along the years that they've been using and releasing as experimental to us. Well, this is an accumulation of that. So I almost imagine that they've taken those things and they've built up these layers of flavor and put it together, called it Kuduro, which immediately puts it in their core range lineup. But this specific version is Kuduro X, and it's at 46.8% ABV. I bought this direct from the distillery, so I know I should have reminded myself what I paid for this when I bought it direct from the distillery, but we can do that right now so I can tell you. Okay, it's asking me to put in I confirm that I'm of the age. Lots of details on it here on the website. I need to go straight to the shop though, because I need to remind you all what the price is. Kuduro X, 75 quid. 75 quid. I know this isn't a lot of bottles. I think it's quite a small bottle outturn, but it's up there in price, isn't it? It's up there. It's getting close to the prices I was complaining about just a second ago. But you know what? I paid a wee bit more than I was comfortable with for the Heritage Chevallier, for the Kuduro, for the first release that came out from Wireworks, for the Bourbon Barrel. They've always just been £5 or £8 too expensive. They arrive, and I realise, okay, this is not too expensive. These are great whiskies. Let's see how this one goes down. Usual caveats, neck pour, freshly opened. It was delivered a few days ago now, though. It's been sitting static on a shelf. No bottle shock to worry about. Very nutty on the nose, almost muesli-like at first approach. Some toffee apple, some definite orchard, but some sweetness in there as well. A lot going on in this one. I'm going to put just a touch more whiskey in the glass here. I want to coat this. Quite a bit of oak and spice on the nose at first approach. It seems to be on the nosing, more wood forward than spirit forward. Some oranginess. Sweet orange as well. There's a kind of orange vibe to this in general, just kind of a rich red orange. Spice I'm struggling with though. I want to just go to the usual kind of cinnamon nutmeg type thing, but there's a softness to, let's go ginger. It's slightly more leaning towards ginger. That helps me, that settles me a bit better. Soft brown sugars too. Quite a balanced thing, not too strong in any direction, but certainly in the slight leaning towards oak derived. That's okay. Let's have a wee sip. Cheers, everyone. A long time ago, I did a vPub and I talked about Scotch alikes. I talked about how Planet Scotch, and I talked about all the world whiskies that were made in that kind of Scotch style, almost like an homage to Scotch, but finding some way to make it slightly different. I think that's the best way we could sum up what we have here. This is not going to slide into the superlatives and hyperbole. I'm just going to say this is, on one sip, the best whiskey I've sipped this evening. The reason I say that, and I'm saying that ahead of things like Ardnamurchan, I'm saying this up against whiskies that are objectively fantastic. One sip, I'm going to have another. People talk about the ability to judge a whiskey based on a 3CL sample or a bar pour or you know, a very small taster at a festival. I think that, especially the more you get into whiskey, the more you feel comfortable with whiskey, I think you're able to tell how good a whiskey is, even on literally a sip at times. There is definitely I don't want to say the word contrived here. There is definitely a sense of a blend going on here. There's a sense of a layered, a complexity, but also a roundness, a softness. Okay, it's been reduced to 46.8. I think I said 46.8. Yes. There's a curated feel to this whiskey, definitely. But with that comes a balance. On the nose, it was all about kind of more kind of leaning me towards the oak types in this. Does it tell us the oak that's in this? It's going to be quite a bit at home. UNESCO, heritage, DNA, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Small batches, pioneer the use of brewer's yeast, long fermentation, slow distillation, on-site maturation, life cycle. That's why it works. It does tell us what this is. This is lightly peated. I'm not picking up any peat on this at all. I've just sipped it on the back of a heavily, heavily peated Kinglassie, so that's okay. You can forgive me that one. I feel like it's got slight vibes of, Wireworks often use STR. There's some STR type spice, ginger vibes in this. A dryness, a treacle overtone, a lovely slight sour bitter edge, a sweetness, orchard and sweet citrus, orange, brown sugar. I'm going to put a wee bit of water in this, not because it needs it, but just because I think it deserves a wee exploration to see if a wee splash of water does anything. I just know this is going to be a companion of mine in the weeks ahead. Warm, comforting, complex, layered, juicy but dry. Yeah, do I wish it was a £5 or a £10 cheaper? Yes. But I say that about literally every Wireworks that I ever pick up, and I still love having them on the shelf. There are multiple English distilleries that I've fallen in love with, right? I've got loads of respect for some of the releases that's come out from Cotswolds. I've loved what I've been enjoying from Circumstance down in Bristol. Crazy stuff. I've loved what's been coming out of Filey Bay recently. But the no-brainer, buy on site, English malt that you need to connect with. And you can pick any one that you like. You can pick any of the releases you want. Kuduro is a great starting point. But Wireworks, if it's got that Wireworks name on it, I think you're not going to go far at all. I think it's a stunner. Scott Thurr is saying, thank God, I thought you were going to give Wireworks a slagging aquaviti. It's great stuff. I'm glad you agree, Scott. Pedro is saying, leaving for the Whiskey Club now. Wish you all an amazing weekend. Barflies and aquaviti. Pedro, let's see. I think the next time that we'll speak to each other, Scotland will have faced Brazil. We know it's going to happen, but I wish I was there, buddy. Maybe you do too. Big Jimmy Jazz is saying, this is the one you tried in Limburg aquaviti. The stuff that we tried in Limburg, Jimmy, my goodness. So yeah, did we get a wee advanced taste of this, or did somebody have it? Dave Barnes is saying, lol, I told you last week if you don't like it, I'll buy it straight off you. And Andrew Pearce is saying they've just released a Calvados cask too. Whiskey with Molly saying Wireworks are holding Scottish distilleries to ransom. If they don't up their game, then the Wireworks will be my favourite whiskey distillery. So these new distilleries need to up their game. And almost exactly the point I'm trying to make is that the Scottish distilleries genuinely need to not keep their heads buried in the sand. And listen, the successes are not doing that. The possibilities, the possibles that I listed tonight are probably not doing that. But the Unintelligibles are at risk of doing that, just having their head in the sand, focused fully on their own portfolio, their own product, and they've got no concept of what's coming out from their peers and their competitors domestically in Scotland, what the independent bottlers are bringing along at the same price point where they're trying to enter into, and more often than not, much cheaper as well. But they're not even aware of what's coming in from our neighbouring countries. If any Scottish producer out there wants a benchmark of something that they need to meet and potentially surpass, not in flavour, not in profile, not in character, you can have your own unique all of that. But when it comes to transparency, integrity, quality, earnest, best, first foot forward, just look to Derbyshire. I'm serious. Yes, you can go up the west coast to Ardnamurchan. You can go down to Campbelltown and look at Springbank. You can go over to Islay and look at Ardnahoe. You can go over to Fife these days and take your pick. And there's lots of things that's going to make you really realize that you have to dial in and you have to lock in and you have to get things right. But if there's anything that needs to reassure you that that's the case, it's producers such as this. Yes, they are making Scotch alike. They're not departing very, very far from the way that Scotch whisky is made, not at all. But they are bringing something that is more expensive than I want to pay for it, and yet I'm still willing to put it on a pedestal. That's the whiskey I'm sipping as we go out with a quiz at the end tonight. This is lovely whiskey. It's lovely whiskey for its age. It's lovely whiskey for its intent and all of that stuff. But I have to concede that it's also 75 quid's worth as well. Got a whiskey shop exclusive from Wireworks, says Scott Thor. Last month at a tasting, was easily the best of the night and was up against some proper Scotches. Wow. Whiskey with Molly again is saying Tom has made himself available and present at lots of festivals. How many on your other lists have made themselves so accessible? I think that's right. I think there is a nice outreach vibe from them as well. I think Tom Lindsay's a lot to do with that. I think he's the face of the brand right now for so much of the community. I think the man does a great job of making whiskey and being an ambassador as well. It's rare to see that. He's got a professionalism about him as well, an appropriateness and a poise. I think they've got a really, really good ambassador on board with Tom Lindsay. But what it comes down to is that an ambassador can only do so much, a blender can only do so much, a whiskey maker can only do so much. The whiskey needs to be dialed in, and I think it is as well. Never had a Wireworks, says Jimmy, of course. Is it similar to anything? Do you know what? It's a wee bit different. It's a wee bit out there. I think that there's a spice, there's an edge to it, but I think that that's often very much from the occasional STR casks. However, there was also a slightly different take to their bourbon barrel release that they put out there that I absolutely adored as well. Jimmy, I think what they do best is just make very good quality whiskey. I don't think it's particularly out there or extreme. It's just got a very good, high quality vibe about it. The little Tony's saying a Barfly's White Peak. Yeah, I mean, maybe not straight away. Maybe in the future, buddy, I would bite their arm off for that. I really would. Gene Kelly's saying Wish and Wireworks were available here, still waiting. It's amazing that it's not got out there, Gene. I hope it gets there. But it's one to maybe put on your list when you come over next time. Gus is saying if anyone's shooting distance of Reading, there's a Wireworks tasting on Tuesday at a bar called Milk. Nice tip, Gus. So if you're in the southeast or west of London, Reading, right? If you're anywhere around there, Reading's Berkshire, isn't it? Yeah, there's a Wireworks tasting at Milk. David Barnes is saying Rule Britannia. And Pierre is saying, think you should save some energy for Support Scotland. Time for the quiz. Frank, you're keeping me on my time tonight. Okay, 2 hours 30. And Peter Lee, UK. Sorry, I missed your birthday, Peter, yesterday, saying good evening, Roy. Heading to stay with Jimmy Jazz in just over a week for our summer holiday. Denise and I want to express our extreme thanks. Thank you, buddy. Sorry I missed your birthday, fella. I hope you had a fantastic time. And I hope your time over in New England is everything that you expect as well for you and Denise. Cheers, buddy. Right. We do have a quiz at the end. Of course we do. We always have a quiz at the end. Thank you to everybody who is... let me clear all of that, actually. We're way beyond that now. Thanks to everybody that's put up with me being late this evening. I do apologise. It's very, very untypical for me. I'm usually here on time. 1 or 2 minutes is the most I'm ever late. But I'm encouraged by all of you who hung out and gave me the patience and stuff, and I really appreciate it. Now strap in. Quiz at the end is always multiple choice. Please stay. Please hang around with us. Please play along and enjoy the multiple choice questions. Look out for the banana skins and the very deliberate asshat questions that make it a wee bit tricky. You might need to read the question once or twice, but if you do struggle, it's meant to pique your curiosity or make you think about things in a certain way, or maybe force you to lean on our amazing community, and that's okay. Whiskey My Way is saying, sorry I'm late, but glad I joined during the Wireworks talk. And Whiskey with Molly is saying, and MDS, no, and that's a good point. Aquavite, where was lag on the lists? Lag is only by 1 or 2 years younger, so that would appear on the list. But I think lag are 2019, aren't they? So they could potentially be the best 5 or 6 years old, I think. Is lag 2019, Ben? I feel like lag is 2019. Might have made a mistake. If I make a mistake, Ben is the man to figure it out. No, 2019 for lag, so just a bit young. But in the future, they'll fall under the same kind of, and maybe they'll fall under the same critique here. Anyway, good luck, everyone. Question 1, thanks for hanging around. Which of these small-scale brands were founded some years ago as a gin distillery, but didn't start making whiskey until very recently? Take care. A, North Point in the Highlands. The brand is Dilclaggy. B, Dearness on Orkney. Or C, Crafty in the Lowlands. What we're looking for here is a distillery that started out making gin, and then in the last few years, 2, 3, 4 years, certainly far too recently for the category of distilleries we were pointing to tonight, to be included, but started to make malt whiskey after making gin. After setting up to make gin, they switched to malt whiskey. Listen, I'm trying to think of a distillery that I know of in Scotland that started up for the purpose of making gin, then switched to whiskey, that I've tried and that I've gotten on board with, and I don't think it exists right now. I think it's a lot of these really quite tiny distilleries that tend to start off making small-scale spirits and then switch to whiskey. But I'm looking for a distillery that started off making gin and then switched to whiskey. North Point in the Highlands, Dearness in Orkney, or Crafty in the Lowlands. Who's in playing along tonight? Trippleberg is still here. Fernick Walker is in playing. Gene Kelly's playing the quiz. Bruce Bernard. Big Jimmy Jazz is in. Steve Atkiss, of course. Steve, good to see you. Graham Young is playing along. Whiskey Me Away is playing the quiz. Dan is here with Petehead. Lachlan McKenzie, of course. Lachlan, good to see you. Stuart Dalglish is playing along. Superb. The majority of you seem to be going for B. Lachlan McKenzie is going for B and C and saying, yeah, Crafty chased names. Crafty has changed their name since Sam Hewen bought them up. It's Galloway now, that's right. Of course it is. We know them through the Malt Whiskey Yearbook still as Crafty, but I suppose we should start talking about Galloway. And Galloway's a better name, if I'm honest, as well. Lachlan, B and C, you're saying spot on, buddy. Well done to everybody who didn't pick up, or didn't slip up, sorry, on the banana skin. North Point is absolutely a very recent malt distillery, but they started off making rum, not gin. Dearness, Crafty, and Galloway in the Lowlands are now making whiskey after making gin. Question 2. Between 61 and 83, between 1961 and 1983, which Highland distillery installed both Saladin maltings and drum maltings whilst increasing its stills? Form that says, apologies, that's a tick that I have. From 2 to 6. So this distillery in that time period installed Saladin maltings, drum maltings, and expanded from 2 to 6 stills. Am I talking about Knockdhu? Am I talking about Glenord? Or am I talking about Glenmurray? First question has convinced me I should call it a night and catch up on replay. Good night, all, says Gus. I'm sorry to scare you away, buddy. I hope you do play it in the replay, and I hope it's not too scary for you. Sleep well, my friend. Thanks for joining us this evening. Scott Thor is saying, this seems very hard very early. Well, the first one, I gave you a 66% chance, so you just went go safe with that. And yes, this question on the face of it looks really hard until you take a beat. Right, Scott? Whiskey with Wally thinks that it's a B night again. James Morgan is also going with B. 2 questions in and they're calling it a B night. It's terrible. Going with the crowd, says Fair Night Walker. Also saying B. James Morgan is saying still up then. Good to see you, James. Okay, between 61 and 63, Saladin, maltings, drum maltings, increase in stills from 2 to 6. Hard question, but I'm asking for a Highland distillery, and there's only one Highland distillery on the list. If you read the question for the quiz at the end, it can often help you. So yeah, if this question does seem really hard for question 2, which starts off, they usually start off very easy, there's obviously something hidden there. Obviously Knockdhu and Glenmurray being Speyside distilleries, so that would have helped you out. 4-0 to Canada. Graham Young, wow, congratulations. Which of the following new distilleries launched an inaugural bottling of 1,494 bottles back in 2021? Again, on the face of it, this looks like a really hard question. I'm asking you to go back 5 years for inaugural and know exactly how many bottles were released. It's ridiculous. A, Kingsbarns, B, Ardnamurchan, or C, Lindors Abbey. I did touch upon this earlier this evening. Hope it helps you. Jeff Sugar Kitty's in, playing along. Good to see you. That looks like a new name. We've got Teamer in. I don't know if I welcomed you before, Teamer. It's nice to have you here. It's nice to have you playing along at the quiz at the end. Paul Gids is in, playing. Fantastic. Steve Atkiss is saying, got it on my shelf. Good for you, buddy. Nice to have you in, Steve. Okay, I can tell you that Kingsbarns inaugural, I think, was maybe 2019. Ardnamurchan was 2020. Lindors Abbey was 2021, but the reason that you would have known that is because of the year 1494, Friar John Corr. That's why the ABV is 49.4 as well. All of that, they hark back to that year. And we mentioned it tonight, Lindors Abbey. It's also the reason that they released 1,494 bottles of the inaugural. Question 4. Which master blender has William Grant's, Lochlee and Compass Box on their CV? Looking for a master blender that's worked for those 3 companies. We're asking, is it A, John Glaser, B, Jill Boyd, C, John Campbell? 3 for 3 already for so many of you. Whiskey Me Away's going for 2.5 out of 3. I don't know why you've given yourself 2.5. I would just round that up, amen, take 3. Stuart O'Glees is saying, I need to study more instead of sampling. Isn't it both the same thing? Pierre is recognising Teamer, saying you've played along earlier. Maybe I do seem to favour the Bs. But I can't hide this from you. This one is obviously, yes, a master blender that originally worked at William Grant's, moved on to Compass Box, and is now currently at Lochlee, is, of course, Jill Boyd. Justin Ranison, good evening, my friends. Very late today. We'll catch the rest on replay. You're in Hong Kong. How can you be this late, buddy? I hope you're having a good time, and thanks for coming in to say hello. Question 5. I'm just showing you, this picture reminds me of Star Wars, you know, the droid transporter and Tatooine. Anyway, I'm being a bit extreme tonight. I've been very off-piste. I'm just going to ask you where we are when we look at this distillery. Oh, no. What? I've reversed the things. And that's not even because I was so early tonight, because I did this quiz much earlier in the day. It's a freebie for everyone. You would have known, of course. I tell you what, you can take this. We know we're in Scotland, but tell us, where are we? Which distillery are we looking at here? Oh, I'm so sorry. I got the slides mixed in the wrong order. Should have given you the option. Ireland, Scotland, or Japan. I'm sure the majority of you would have got this absolutely right. We are in Scotland, and here's the zoomed out picture where you can even see, I made such a mess of this slide. If you look in the window there, the brand is there. We're talking about Glenmurray. Glenmurray and Dore, even everyone has spotted it. Good eyes, Chris. Occasionally I do make that mistake. I do make a backside of it. It's been a wee while. But the good news for all of you is that it's a freebie for everyone. We're, of course, looking at Speyside. We're looking at Scotland. It is Glenmurray. Question 6. Okay, now it is going to get tougher on the run-in. Which of these are amongst the 5 smallest of Diageo's distilleries? I'm going to give you a list of 3 distilleries, and one of them is amongst Diageo's 5 smallest. Okay, A, Glenspey, B, Glendullan, and C, Glenelgin. Which of those distilleries is amongst Diageo's 5 smallest? Fair Night Walker is suggesting the pass mark is now 6. Nobody. Pass mark is always going to be 5. Thanks, Equiviti. I'll take the gift, says Jean Kelly. Yeah, I'd like to say you're welcome, but it is a wee bit of an error on my part, buddy. But please, Jean, take it and enjoy it. Not that small, says Jimmy Jazz. So A, yeah, really not that small. I think there's a list in this Malt Whiskey Yearbook that's... It's the only distillery that's at this specific capacity, actually. This is way too easy for some, says James Morgan. Yeah. Well, some of you are. It's becoming a bit of a difficult balancing act because it's pretty hard to challenge some people, right? And still keep the quiz accessible. I think that's the problem I'm having these days. I was thinking Oban or Royal Lochnagar. Absolutely, Lachlan, you're spot on. These are absolutely within the 5 smallest Diageo distilleries, but out of the list of 3 here, as most of you have spotted, Steve Atkins included, it is Glenspey at 1.5 million litres theoretical capacity. Glendullan is pretty massive at 5 million. Glenelgin is 2.7 million. I thought I might be able to trip you up on that one and have you answering Glenelgin, but no, it was Glenspey. Question 7. Clynelish is famous for an association with the brand Ainslie and Heilbronn. But what or who were Ainslie and Heilbronn? What were they? What was that brand? A, they were former owners of the distillery. B, they were blenders of Scotch whiskies. Or C, they were importers of Scotch whiskies. So this is a famous brand. If you go back to very early bottlings of Clynelish with a very, very specific design label that's been some homage releases from the likes of the Thompson brothers over the years. Wonderful liquid. I tried 1 or 2 at Limburg, and depending on the freshness of the bottle and what actual expression it was, 1 or 2 of them over the years have been exemplary. The best one I ever tried was at Golden Promise Whiskey Bar in Paris. I was recommended to try one. It was pricey, it was expensive, but I didn't regret a drop of it. It was absolutely sublime. But what was Ainslie and Heilbronn? What was the name on that labelling all about for Clynelish? Were they owners of the distillery? Were they blenders of Scotch whisky? Or were they importers of Scotch whisky? Lots of you celebrating 6 out of 6 already, which is fantastic. I wonder if there's going to be any attrition here. I was drinking a mystery malt 12-year-old Clynelish tonight. Lovely stuff, says Scott Thor. Lucky man to have picked up the Clynelish, especially when it's one that you're enjoying, right? Worth the 60 quid, 65 quid. Don't know this one. Fairnight Walker is saying I'm guessing A. Good for you, Fairnight Walker, because if you guess A, you're correct. But anybody such as Dan DVDW, 12, has also said, but also B. You're absolutely spot on. Ainslie and Heilbronn were actually owners of Clynelish up until the Pattison crash, but they were blenders of Scotch whisky also. But at one point they actually owned the distillery to the original Glengyle, which in modern times we know is Brora, of course. So if you answered A or B on this one, I'm being quite kind to you potentially tonight. You're absolutely spot on. Question 8. What happened at Glen Scotia in May of 2000? Wow, Roy. Oh, there has to be attrition towards the end, right? What happened at Glen Scotia in May of 2000? A. Springbank runs the distillery. B. Glencatrin mothball the distillery. Or C. Loch Lomond staff take over the running of the distillery. What happened in May of 2000 down at Glen Scotia? Talk about an open-ended question, says Jean Kelly. Scott Thoracina, the only one I didn't guess. So sorry, Scott, if you've slipped up a wee bit. Big Jimmy Jazz, I think, was going for C on the Ainsley and Heilbronn one as well. Sorry for the football talk. Canada 5-0 at a World Cup. Who would have thought? Wow. Go Canada. But that's incredible. It's truly incredible. Kind of feeling sorry for Qatar. I'll maybe go and watch the highlights after we're finished here tonight. Thanks, Ashley, for this answer. Ashley at Glen Scotia, maybe? Is that what you're suggesting? I can tell you that Springbank ran the distillery at Glen Scotia for periods in the 1990s, most notably 1999. Glencatrin did mothball the distillery, but in 2000, specifically May, that was when Loch Lomond and their staff first took the reins at Glen Scotia. Now, it would be another decade before they really started to dial things in and really started to improve things. But Loch Lomond is a group, and I know there's been lots of buyovers and things over the years, and it's only been in the last maybe 10 years that Loch Lomond group has moved in the much more positive direction, I would suggest. But that's what was happening in May of 2000. The banana skin there was obviously the Springbank staff. Question 9. Which of these distilleries started making whiskey first? There's another way to say which the oldest distillery here. A. Strathearn in the Southern Highlands, B. Torrevake on Skye, or C. Nicknean in the Western Highlands. Strathearn, Torrevake, or Nicknean. Which of these started making whiskey first? Fairnight Walker on 8, Trippleberg on 8, Grain of Malt on 8, DVDW on 8. Ben Demon Hunter, good to see you. And Ben, Paul Gidley is also on an 8, Graham Young on an 8, Sugar Kitty Whiskey with Molly on an 8, Ian Bruce on an 8, Gene Kelly on an 8. Fantastic stuff. Lots and lots of 8s. Good chance of maybe getting over the line with a couple of 10 out of 10s tonight, possibly. Wow, 5 out of Canada could be the first ever World Cup win coming. Graham, it could be. That's a shoe, and that's nobody's coming back from 5-0 down. Okay, I can tell you that surprisingly, the inaugural from Strathearn might have been quite recently, last year or so, but in fact, they've been going around since 2015. Torrevake was 2016 and Nicknean was 2017. So only by a year, Strathearn has been making whiskey the longest, albeit that they weren't in 2015 owned by Douglas Lang. These days they are. So there we go. We're at the penultimate question. We're coming into the ass hat at the end. Let's see who's on a 9 out of 9 before we start proceedings. Ben Whiskey with Molly. Gino Camo, sorry, he's on an 8 along with Whiskey Mail Way. Lachlan slipped up tonight. He's on a 7. Unfortunate, buddy, but I'm grateful that you're here. Petehead is on an 8 out of 9, but the 9s come in again. 9 out of 9 for Ian Bruce. Steve Atkiss on a 9. Scott Thor's on an 8. We know why, Scott. You can blame me for that, buddy. Sugar Kitty on a 9. Graham Young on a 9. It's jumping around. Apologies, Grain of Malt on a 9. Gene Kelly, Fairnight Walker, Trippleberg, fantastic. Okay, here is the asshat at the end. How many GOW or GO, G-O-W, how many GOW Scotch malt distilleries are currently in operation? Bit of a head scratcher. About the same as the number of A, core range releases from Glengyle, and I mean today. B, operational distilleries on Islay in the year 2000. Or C, years of operation since the founding year of Jackton. Now, of course, this reads like a Menno question. Of course it does, but it's deliberately meant to be tricky. It's deliberately meant that you know the answer to two different things and are able to navigate your way through. How many GOW distilleries are in existence in Scotland operating today? Is it the same as the number of core range releases from Glengyle? Operational distilleries on Islay in the year 2000, years of operation since the founding year of Jackton. Whiskey Amy Away is saying, what's GOW? That means that any distillery with G-O-W in the name. So if I was to say how many Loch distilleries, it would be Loch Lee, it would be Loch Lomond, and however many Lochs there are. Fairnight Walker is given a perfect example. Inchgower is a GOW distillery. So there you go, Amy. Inchgower is 1. You've been given 1. She's going, oh, thank you. So now you get it. Good stuff. Steve Atkins is saying, oh, behave. Graham Malt is saying, ah, Jesus. Come on. Sliding in on a shrimp sandwich. Come on, come on. If I can help you, I can tell you core range releases from Glengyle, number 3. That's Sandend, 12-year-old in the Portsoy. Operational distilleries on Ireland, 2000, depending on whether you want to include Brookladdy in the mix. Ardbeg was already up and running again, 6 or 7. Years of operation since the founding year of Jackton. We're also in the realm of 6 there. So let's go with it. Okay. Core range releases from Glengyle, number 3, and Inchgower, Ardgowan in Glasgow. Frank Petehead rhymed them off. Well done, Frank. A was what I was looking for. How did that hold things together? Did any of you manage a 10 out of 10? Scott Thor saying, oh, balls. I thought C was 3. Oh, so you got half of it right, Scott, and you went for it. What were we answering on C again? The founding year of Jackton. No, it's actually been going since 2020, believe it or not. How many 10 out of 10s do we have tonight? Gene Kelly celebrating a 10 out of 10. Fantastic, buddy. Well done. Ian Bruce also celebrating a 10 out of 10. Sugar Kitty with a 10 out of 10. Superb. And Whiskey with Molly, a 10 out of 10. Fantastic, of course, Ben. A Grain of Malt James is celebrating a 10 over in Sweden. Fairnight Walker, thanks to the Barflies and a bit of luck, he's also celebrating a 10 out of 10. Graham Young in Canada, not only celebrating a 5-0 for his team, his team up against Qatar tonight, which is an amazing score. So that would mean that Mexico, the USA, oh no, did Mexico draw? No, Mexico won. I think all the host nations have won their opening games, right? Or Canada in their second game. Now, this is their second game. Canada's in their second game. Don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm back in football again. Forget about me. Grain of Malt, 10 out of 10. Graham, a young 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Time to finally hit the sack, says Frank. Thanks for organising, aggravating to all of you. See you next time. Slancheva. I feel the same way tonight. I'm a huge embarrassed about the fact that I was so late tonight. It doesn't normally happen. I will try not to make the same mistake again. I'm grateful to all of you for hanging out with me. I'm grateful to all of you for being patient and waiting until I finally turned up. I know that sometimes the topics get a wee bit niche. I know that sometimes the quiz at the end gets a wee bit difficult. But it's just kind of following mood and kind of what's on my mind. what I like to talk about, what I like to share, and I just have to hope that somebody out there finds a wee bit of interest, curiosity, or fun in it. More than anything, I just enjoy sitting here with you all on a Thursday night or a Sunday night if it's a Patreon lock-in. It's a treat for me and a wee bit of a mental health boost as well. I love it. I appreciate you all. I appreciate what you do for me. I appreciate the continued support. And I love the fact that you enjoy hanging out here on a Thursday night as well. I will be on time next week, and I will try my best to not pick the creaky stool. Apologies if that's also been a distraction for you tonight. Thanks, Roy, and good night, folks, says Lachlan. Whiskey with Molly saying thanks, Roy. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Lachlan. Gino Camo is saying Aquaviti, thanks for a great vPub. Have a great weekend and cheers. Cheers and thank you, Roy. Hopefully see you soon this summer. Graham, it'd be brilliant to see you this summer. Scott Thorne is saying always a good night. Thank you, Scott. Nice to have you here, buddy. Always a privileged night, everyone. I'm going to raise this wee glass to say thank you for hanging out with me on another Thursday. Remind you all that you're very dearly loved and look forward to hanging out with you again next week. Until then, to your health. Slán Chevallier. Cheers.